She was rejected in front of the entire court, but her revenge will shake the kingdom to its core. Tonight, beneath a blood-red moon, Nyra Vale's world will shatter. The sacred mating bond, the one thing that defines worth in this brutal kingdom, will flicker to life between her and the ruthless Lycan king, Alaric Virathorn. And then he'll destroy it. 3 words that will break her. I reject you. But what they don't know, what he doesn't know, is that rejection won't kill her. It will birth something far more dangerous. Stay until the end to see how the girl they discarded becomes the queen they'll kneel before. Drop a like and comment what city you're watching from. The stench of fear tasted like copper on Nyra's tongue. She stood in the grand hall of the Virathorn Palace, her bare feet cold against marble floors that had witnessed 1,000 mating ceremonies before hers. The architecture loomed, vaulted ceilings disappearing into shadow, walls carved with the faces of ancient Lycan kings, their stone eyes judging every soul below. Torchlight flickered against gilded columns, casting dancing shadows that made the carved wolves seem to move, to hunt. Tonight, those stone eyes seemed to bore into her specifically. Around her, the court pressed close. Too close. Bodies packed shoulder to shoulder, the heat of them suffocating despite the autumn chill seeping through the palace's bones. Nyra could feel their stares like physical weight, nobility in their silk and furs, warriors in their ceremonial armor, servants craning from the back to witness the spectacle. The smell of expensive perfume mixed with sweat and wine, creating a nauseating cocktail that made her stomach turn. Because that's what she was. A spectacle. She's shaking, someone whispered, the words cutting through the low murmur of conversation. Of course she is. Look at her. The orphan girl. This is embarrassing. Nyra's fingers trembled at her sides. She'd worn the ceremonial dress they'd given her, white linen, too thin for the season, designed to make her look pure, virginal, worthy. But the fabric hung wrong on her frame, too loose at the shoulders, too tight at the hips. Nothing ever fit her right. The seamstress who'd altered it had looked at her with barely concealed pity, letting out the seams as far as they'd go and still having the dress gape at her collarbones. Nothing about her had ever fit right. The blood moon hung visible through the massive windows that lined the eastern wall, its crimson light washing over the assembled crowd like a baptism of violence. In Lycan tradition, the blood moon amplified the mating bond, made it impossible to ignore when 2 souls were destined to intertwine. The elders said you could feel it in your chest, a pull, a recognition, a certainty that carved itself into your very bones. Nyra had never felt anything like that. At 23, she was already considered late. Most wolves found their mates by 20, some as early as 16. But Nyra had stood through 7 blood moons without so much as a flutter of recognition. No pull, no bond, nothing. Just the same hollow emptiness that had lived in her chest since her parents died when she was 12. The last of the candidates, Elder Morvith announced from his position at the base of the throne. His voice carried the rasp of centuries, though his body remained strong. All Lycan elders aged slowly, their power sustaining them long past human limits. White hair fell to his shoulders, and his eyes were the clouded gold of ancient amber. Nyra Vale of the lower district. Step forward. Her legs didn't want to move. Behind her she heard the snicker, barely concealed. Then another. Waste of time, a male voice muttered, just loud enough for her to hear. She doesn't even have a proper wolf. Why is she even here? A woman responded. This is an insult to the ceremony. That part was true. Nyra's wolf had never emerged. Not during her first shift at 16. Not during any moon since. While others transformed into magnificent beasts, powerful, sleek, deadly, Nyra remained trapped in her human skin. Incomplete. Broken. She'd spent years waiting, hoping, praying that one day she'd feel the change, that her wolf would wake up. It never did. They called her wolfless behind her back, sometimes to her face. She forced her feet forward, one step, then another, until she stood in the center of the ceremonial circle, a ring of silver inlaid into the marble, inscribed with runes that supposedly enhanced the bond's recognition. The metal felt warm beneath her soles despite the cold, thrumming with some ancient energy she couldn't quite name. Kneel, Elder Morvith commanded. Nyra knelt. The marble bit into her knees, but she kept her spine straight. Whatever dignity she had left, she'd maintain it. Even if her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs, even if sweat beaded at the base of her neck despite the chill, even if every instinct screamed at her to run. Tonight we present the final candidate to our king, Morvith continued, his words following the ancient script. His voice echoed off the vaulted ceiling, filling every corner of the massive hall. Should the bond recognize her, she will ascend as queen and bear the future of our bloodline. Should it reject her, she will be cast beyond our borders, for no wolf unworthy of our king may dwell among us. He didn't soften the words, didn't try to make them sound less brutal. Everyone knew what happened to those rejected by the bond. Exile, disgrace. A mark of such fundamental unworthiness that most didn't survive the shame. Some killed themselves before the guards could escort them out. Others died in the wildlands, torn apart by rogues or starvation. The lucky ones simply disappeared, their names forgotten, their existence erased from pack memory. The bond didn't lie. If it rejected you, something in your very soul was flawed. Nyra's fingers curled against her thighs, nails digging into the thin fabric. The crowd parted like a sea splitting, and Alaric Virathorn entered. The room didn't just quiet, it transformed. Every wolf in the hall felt it, the presence of an alpha so dominant that their instincts screamed submission. Nyra felt her head want to bow automatically, her shoulders want to curve inward, everything in her biology recognizing the predator that had just entered the space. The air itself seemed to thicken, to press down with the weight of his authority. She forced herself to look up. Alaric stood 6.5 feet tall, his frame built like violence barely contained. Broad shoulders that strained against the formal black jacket he wore, arms thick with muscle that spoke of years of combat training, a chest that tapered to a narrow waist, the build of a warrior who'd earned every scar. His face was all hard angles, sharp jaw covered with dark stubble, blade-straight nose that had been broken at least once, cheekbones that could cut glass. Dark hair fell just past his collar, slightly disheveled, as if he'd run his hands through it recently. And his eyes, God, his eyes, they were the gold of a wolf caught in torchlight. Predator eyes. The kind that tracked movement with lethal precision, that calculated threat levels in microseconds, that had watched men die and felt nothing. And right now they were fixed on her with something that looked like boredom. He'd seen 73 candidates over the past week. Noble daughters, warrior women, healers with powerful bloodlines. Women who were everything Nyra wasn't. Beautiful, strong, worthy. Nyra was number 74. The last. The scraping of the barrel. "Rise," Alaric said. His voice was deep, the kind that vibrated in your chest cavity. Authoritative without trying to be. Nyra stood on shaking legs, her knees protesting the movement. She was tall for a woman, 5'8", but she still had to crane her neck to meet his gaze. Up close, he was even more intimidating. The sheer size of him, the contained power, the cold intelligence in those gold eyes. "Name," he said flatly. "Nyra Vale, Your Majesty." Her voice came out steadier than she'd expected. Small victory. His eyes traveled over her slowly. Not with desire, with assessment. The way someone might examine a horse at market. Checking teeth, checking confirmation, checking for flaws. His gaze lingered on her thin wrists, her angular shoulders, the way her dress hung loose where it should have clung. She knew what he saw. Mousy brown hair that refused to hold a curl, pulled back in a simple braid that was already falling apart. Gray eyes too large for her face, making her look perpetually startled. A frame too thin, too angular, without the curves that lichen males typically favored. Scars on her hands from years of working in the palace kitchens, her only employment after her parents died. Burns from hot pots, cuts from knives, the rough calluses of someone who'd spent their life in manual labor. Nothing special, nothing worthy, nothing remotely queen-like. "You're wolfless," Alaric stated. Not a question. "Yes, Your Majesty." A muscle ticked in his jaw. His hands, large, scarred, deadly, flexed at his sides. "And you're here why, exactly?" The words landed like a slap. Around them, Nyra heard the tittering begin. Quiet laughter, cruel amusement rippling through the assembled court. "The law states all unmated females of age must be presented," Elder Morvith interjected smoothly, though she caught the warning note in his voice. "Regardless of—" "I know the law," Alaric cut him off, his eyes never leaving Nyra's face. I wrote half the damn laws. I'm asking her. Nyra's throat felt like sandpaper. She swallowed hard, tasting blood where she'd bitten her tongue. Because I was told to come, Your Majesty. You were told to come, Alaric repeated slowly, as if testing the words. So you came, like a dog following commands. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Heat flooded her face, humiliation mixed with the first spark of anger. Behind her, someone laughed outright. I follow the law, Your Majesty, she said, forcing the words past clenched teeth. The law, he said, was written when our people had standards, when bloodlines meant something, when wolves were wolves, not, he gestured at her dismissively, whatever this is. The anger flared hotter. Nyra felt her nails dig into her palms hard enough to draw blood. I didn't choose to be wolfless, she said quietly. No, Alaric agreed. You were just born defective, which makes this whole charade even more pointless. He turned to Elder Morvith, clearly ready to dismiss her without even attempting the bond recognition. This is a waste of time. She doesn't even have a wolf. How exactly is she supposed to produce heirs? Assuming anyone could stomach the idea of... It hit them both at the same moment. The bond. Nyra gasped, her hand flying to her chest as something inside her lurched violently to life. It felt like a hook had buried itself beneath her sternum and yanked, pulling toward Alaric with force that nearly knocked her off her feet. Her vision whited out for a second, and when it cleared, everything looked different, sharper, more vivid. And there, connecting her chest to his, a golden thread. Glowing, pulsing, undeniable. Across from her, Alaric staggered. His eyes went wide, genuine shock fracturing that composed expression. One hand came up to his chest, fingers splaying over his heart, as if he could feel the physical manifestation of the bond. The crowd erupted. The bond! It's recognizing. She's his mate. No fucking way. The wolfless girl? This can't be right. The voices crashed over Nyra in waves, but she barely heard them. All her attention was fixed on the thread, the bond, the thing she'd dreamed about her entire life and never thought she'd experience. The pull intensified. Nyra could feel it now, a golden thread connecting her chest to his, thrumming with energy, with recognition, with certainty. Every cell in her body screamed that this man was hers, meant for her, destined, the other half of her soul. For the first time in her life, Nyra felt complete. The emptiness that had lived in her chest since her parents died. The void she'd tried to fill with work, with hope, with anything, suddenly had something in it. Someone. The bond wrapped around that void like a bandage, like a promise. She looked up at Alaric, tears pricking her eyes, something like hope cracking open in her chest, and watched his expression transform from shock to revulsion. His face twisted, gold eyes going hard, cold, disgusted, like he'd just tasted something rotten. No, he said. The word was quiet, almost gentle, but it detonated in Nyra's chest like a bomb. No, Alaric repeated, louder now. He took a step back, then another, as if proximity to her was physically painful. The bond stretched between them, pulling taut. No, this is wrong. This is fucking wrong. Your Majesty. Elder Morvith stepped forward, his ancient face creased with concern and something that might have been fear. The bond has recognized. You cannot... I don't care what the bond recognized, Alaric snarled. The gold in his eyes had gone molten, furious. His hands trembled at his sides, not with fear, but with rage. Look at her. She's wolfless, weak. She has no lineage, no power, no worth to this kingdom whatsoever. Each word was a nail driven into Nyra's coffin. She couldn't breathe. The thread between them was still there, still pulling, but now it felt like it was strangling her. Her lungs wouldn't expand, her throat had closed. She cannot be my queen, Alaric continued. He turned to address the court, his voice carrying to every corner of the massive hall, projecting, making sure everyone heard. I will not bind myself to weakness. I will not condemn our bloodline to dilution with defective genetics. I will not sentence this kingdom to a future of powerless heirs who can't even shift. Your Majesty, please, Morvith tried again. The bond is sacred. To reject it is to court disaster. The bond made a mistake. Alaric cut him off. His jaw was set, his eyes blazing. It happens. Rare, but it happens. And I will not sacrifice everything our ancestors built because some cosmic accident decided this. He gestured at Nyra with contempt. This broken thing is worthy of being queen. Nyra's knees buckled. She caught herself, barely, her hands grasping at empty air. Around them, the court was silent now. Watching, waiting. Some looked shocked. Most looked satisfied, vindicated. They'd known all along she didn't belong here. A woman in the front row, Lady Celestine, one of the nobles who'd been presented earlier in the week, smiled. Actually smiled. Alaric, Morvith said quietly, think about what you're doing. But Alaric wasn't listening. He turned back to Nyra, and the disgust in his eyes was so pure, so complete, it felt like acid on her skin. She tried to speak. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I, Alaric Virathorn, King of the Northern Territories and Alpha of the Lycan Council. He began formally. Don't, Nyra finally managed to whisper. It was the only word she could force past the vice crushing her throat. Please don't. His eyes flickered, something that might have been hesitation, might have been regret. It lasted maybe half a second. Then it was gone. I hereby reject the bond recognized between myself and Nyra Vale. The thread snapped. It didn't fade gently. It didn't dissolve. It tore apart with such violence that Nyra screamed, a raw animal sound of agony that she didn't recognize as her own voice. Pain erupted in her chest, white-hot and all-consuming. It felt like someone had reached into her ribcage and ripped her heart out while it was still beating. The bond that had existed for maybe 90 seconds, the bond that had made her feel whole for the first time in her goddamn life, was shredding itself apart inside her. She collapsed to her knees, her hands clawing at her chest, as if she could hold the pieces together. Her nails tore at the thin fabric of her dress, leaving red marks on her skin. She couldn't. The bond was dying, and it was taking pieces of her with it. Around her, the court watched. Some looked horrified, genuinely disturbed by the violence of her reaction. Most looked entertained, fascinated by her suffering. Oh God, she heard someone say. She's actually crying. She was. Tears streamed down her face, hot and unstoppable. But worse than the tears was the sound coming out of her throat, broken sobs that she couldn't control, couldn't stop, couldn't even muffle. They tore from her chest like chunks of flesh. Pathetic, a woman's voice drifted from the crowd. Lady Celestine again. Can't even handle a rejection with dignity, someone else agreed. What did she expect? That she actually deserved him? Wolfless trash. Nyra tried to stand. Her legs wouldn't hold her. She fell forward, catching herself on her hands, her hair falling around her face like a curtain. Blood from her palms, she'd torn them open on the ceremonial circle's rough silver, pooled on the white marble. Above her, Alaric stood motionless. When she managed to look up through her tears, through the hair sticking to her wet cheeks, she saw him watching her with something that might have been regret flickering in his eyes. For just a moment, his mask cracked. She saw conflict there, pain even. But then his jaw set, his shoulders squared, and the mask returned, cold, hard, impenetrable. Remove her, he said. His voice was flat now, empty. And let it be known, the king has no mate. The search continues elsewhere. Guards materialized on either side of her. Rough hands grabbed her arms, hauling her upright even though her legs were shaking too badly to support her weight. Her feet dragged uselessly against the marble. No, Nyra gasped. Please. Escort her beyond the territory borders, Alaric continued, not looking at her anymore. He addressed the guards, the elder, anyone but her. By law, rejected bonds must be severed completely. She is no longer welcome within kingdom lands. The words penetrated through the agony. Exile. He was exiling her. Your Majesty. Elder Morvith tried one last time. His voice carried urgency now, almost desperation. Perhaps we should consider a period of, the decision is made, Alaric cut him off. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. She leaves tonight, immediately. I don't want her inside these walls when dawn breaks. He turned and walked away. Just like that. Didn't look back. Didn't hesitate. His boots echoed against the marble as he strode toward the throne, each step putting more distance between them. The bond's remnants twisted in Nyra's chest, trying to pull her after him, but it was dying, dissolving, leaving nothing but poison in its wake. The guards started dragging her backward. Nyra's feet scraped against the marble, her vision blurring from tears and pain. The faces of the court blended together, a sea of cruel amusement, of satisfied malice, of cold indifference. She got what she deserved. Imagine thinking she could be queen. The bond made a mistake, obviously. Poor thing, might have been kinder to just kill her. That last comment came from an older woman, said with something that might have been pity. Nyra's head fell forward, her chin hitting her chest. The pain in her torso had spread, burning through her veins, turning her blood to acid. Every heartbeat felt like it might be her last. This was how rejected bonds killed people. Not quickly, slowly, painfully. The bond tried to reform, tried to reach for the other half that had been violently severed, and when it couldn't find that connection, it turned inward, consuming, destroying, until you begged for death. The guards hauled her through a side door, away from the grand hall. The corridor beyond was narrow and dark, lit only by torches that threw dancing shadows on stone walls. Her feet dragged uselessly behind her, the thin slippers she wore falling off somewhere along the way. "Please," she whispered, though she didn't know what she was begging for anymore. Mercy? Death? For this to be a nightmare she'd wake from. One of the guards, a man with a scar across his cheek and kind eyes that didn't match his profession, glanced down at her almost pityingly. "Don't take it personal, girl. You never had a chance." The other guard, younger, sneered. His face was all hard angles and casual cruelty. "Wolfless bitch should never have been allowed in the hall. Waste of everyone's fucking time." "That's enough," the scarred guard said quietly. "Why?" "She can't hear shit. Look at her. Half dead already." They carried her through a maze of corridors, down stairs that descended into the bowels of the palace, through chambers that grew progressively colder and damper. The torchlight grew sparser. The walls turned from polished marble to rough stone. This was the underbelly of the palace, where servants and guards moved through shadows, where the pretty facade fell away to reveal the bones beneath. Eventually they emerged into the night. The blood moon hung overhead, fat and crimson and mocking. They were at the eastern gate, the one that led into the wild lands. Beyond the torchlight, darkness stretched infinite and hungry. Nyra could hear sounds from that darkness, howls, screams, things moving through underbrush. The wildlands were untamed territory, full of rogues and predators, and things that didn't have names. Even full lichens avoided them unless they had no choice. The guards threw her forward. Nyra hit the ground hard, her palms tearing open on gravel. Blood welled hot against the cold night air. She felt stones embed themselves in her skin, felt the impact jar through her already damaged body. "You crossed that boundary," the scarred guard said, pointing to a line of white stones that marked the kingdom's edge. "You don't come back. King's orders. You understand?" Nyra couldn't answer, couldn't even lift her head. "And if you try," the younger one added, his voice carrying gleeful malice, "we'll kill you ourselves, slowly. Make an example." "Jesus Christ, Garrett," the scarred guard muttered. "She's already dying. You don't need to—" "Orders are orders. King said make sure she understands." They didn't wait for a response. The gate clanged shut behind them, the sound of the lock engaging echoing in the darkness. Their footsteps faded, leaving only silence. And Nyra, alone. She knelt there in the dirt, blood dripping from her hands, her chest still screaming with phantom agony. The ceremonial dress was torn, filthy, spotted with her own blood. Her hair had come loose from its braid, hanging in tangled ropes around her face. Alone. She'd been alone before. Orphaned at 12, she'd learned to survive on scraps and spite. But this was different. This was a loneliness that lived inside her bones, that had carved out the space where the bond had existed and left nothing but a howling void. A sound escaped her throat, half laugh, half sob. It sounded insane even to her own ears. "Get up," she whispered to herself. Her body didn't respond. "Get up." Her legs trembled, her arms shook. But somehow, impossibly, she managed to push herself to her feet. The white stones marked the boundary. Once she crossed them, there was no return. Exile was permanent, absolute. The kingdom's magic would recognize her as outcast, and if she tried to cross back, it would kill her, slowly, painfully, the same way the rejection wound was killing her now. Nyra looked back at the palace one last time. It rose against the night sky like a monument to everything she'd never be. Light glowed from 1,000 windows. She could hear music drifting on the wind. They'd probably already resumed the celebration, moved on to the next candidate, forgotten her entirely. Alaric would find another mate, someone worthy. Someone with a wolf, with power, with beauty and grace and everything Nyra lacked. Someone who wouldn't make him recoil in disgust. And she would die out here in the dark. The bond's rejection wound festered in her chest, pumping poison with every heartbeat. She could feel it killing her, slowly, methodically, breaking down her organs one by one. Nyra turned toward the wildlands, then stepped across the boundary. The moment her foot touched the ground beyond the white stones, something shifted. The air felt thicker here, alive with danger. The forest seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat, old magic, wild magic, the kind that didn't answer to kings or councils. In the distance, she heard howling, not the controlled songs of pack wolves, but the ragged screams of rogues, things that had lost their humanity, their sanity, everything but hunger and rage. She had no weapons, no supplies, no wolf to protect her. She was going to die out here. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she felt almost relieved. At least death would be faster than this agony. Nyra walked. She didn't know where she was going, just away. Away from the palace, away from the kingdom, away from the mate who'd rejected her like she was garbage. The forest swallowed her quickly. Trees pressed close on either side, their branches creating a canopy so thick that even the blood moon's light couldn't penetrate. She stumbled over roots, tore her dress on thorns, felt scratches open on her arms and face. Blood trickled down her skin, warm and wet. She didn't care. Hours passed. Or maybe minutes. Time felt strange, slippery. The pain in her chest warped everything, made reality bend and twist. She walked until her legs gave out. When she finally collapsed, it was almost a relief. Nyra fell to her knees in a small clearing, then pitched forward onto her side. Dead leaves cushioned her fall. The scent of earth and decay filled her nose, organic, ancient, somehow comforting. Above her, through a gap in the canopy, she could see the blood moon. "Fuck you," she whispered to it. Her voice was hoarse, broken. Then louder, "Fuck you." The moon didn't respond. It just hung there, red and bloated and cruel, mocking her. The same moon that was supposed to bring mates together had presided over her destruction. Nyra's eyes burned with tears that wouldn't come anymore. She'd cried herself dry. Her chest heaved with sobs that had no sound. Everything hurt. Everything. Her hands, her knees, her chest where the bond had been torn apart. Even her skin hurt, like she was being flayed from the inside out. "I didn't ask for this," she said to the darkness. "I didn't ask to be wolfless. I didn't ask for the bond. I didn't ask for any of it." Silence answered her. Just the rustle of leaves, the distant howl of something hunting. "I just wanted—" Her voice cracked, broke. "I just wanted to matter, just once, to someone." The words dissolved into nothing, disappeared into the uncaring dark. Nyra closed her eyes. She could feel it now, death circling closer. The rejection wound had spread through her entire body. Her heartbeat was erratic, fluttering like a dying bird, her breathing shallow, labored. Blood leaked from her nose, her ears, internal hemorrhaging as her body shut down. This was it. 23 years of fighting to survive, of scraping together dignity from nothing, of hoping that maybe someday she'd be enough. All of it ending here, in the dirt. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though she didn't know who she was apologizing to. Her parents, maybe. Dead 12 years, but still she felt like she'd failed them somehow. They'd loved her despite her lack of a wolf, told her she was special, that her time would come. They'd been wrong. Her consciousness started to slip. The darkness crept in at the edges of her vision, soft and almost welcoming, like falling asleep after years of insomnia. Then, pain. Different pain. This one wasn't in her chest. It was everywhere. Her skin felt like it was splitting open. Her bones felt like they were breaking and reforming. Her blood felt like it had caught fire. Nyra's eyes snapped open. "No!" she gasped. "No, no, no!" But it was happening. After 7 years of silence, of absence, of nothing, her wolf was waking up. And it was screaming. The transformation that should have been natural, easy, instinctive. It was agony. Her spine arched, vertebrae cracking and reshaping with sounds like gunshots. Her jaw extended with a sound like tearing leather, her skull restructuring itself. Her fingers curled and then burst into claws, bones lengthening, skin splitting to accommodate the change. Nyra screamed. The sound became a howl halfway through, animal and enraged and desperate. Her clothes tore as her body expanded. Muscle packed onto her frame, bones thickened, everything growing, changing, becoming. Fur erupted across her skin, but it wasn't the brown or gray or even black of normal wolves. It was silver, pure gleaming silver that seemed to catch and hold the moonlight, that glowed with its own internal luminescence. Her vision changed. Colors muted, but shapes sharpened to crystal clarity. Scents exploded in her nose. Earth, blood, fear, decay. And underneath it all, something darker, older. Power that smelled like ozone and midnight. And beneath it all, power, raw, primal, ancient power flooding through her veins like liquid fire. The wolf that emerged from Nyra's broken human shell wasn't normal. It was massive, easily twice the size of an average she-wolf, closer to an alpha male in stature. Its eyes burned with silver fire instead of gold, and when it opened its mouth, shadows seemed to pour from its throat like smoke. Nyra, or the thing that had been Nyra, stood on 4 legs for the first time. The forest around her had gone silent. Even the rogues had stopped howling. Every creature for miles felt it, the emergence of something that shouldn't exist, something that broke the rules. The silver wolf lifted its head and released a sound that wasn't quite a howl, wasn't quite a roar. It was something older, something that made the trees themselves seem to lean away, that sent birds exploding from branches, that made the very earth seem to tremble. Inside the wolf's mind, Nyra's consciousness flickered. What am I? The wolf didn't answer in words, but she felt its response. Primal satisfaction, violent joy, and underneath it all, rage. Endless, burning rage, at the kingdom that cast them out, at the mate who rejected them, at the world that had deemed them worthless. The wolf turned its massive head toward the south, toward the kingdom that had cast them out. And somewhere in the palace, miles away, Alaric Virathorn jolted awake from a restless sleep. His hand flew to his chest. The bond he'd rejected, the bond he'd torn apart with his own words. It wasn't gone. It was burning, bleeding, and pulling. He staggered out of bed, his breath coming in harsh gasps. This wasn't possible. Rejected bonds died. They couldn't, they shouldn't. But there it was. Faint, damaged, twisted into something he didn't recognize, something that felt wrong in ways he couldn't articulate. But alive. Undeniably, impossibly alive. Alaric's hands shook as he gripped the edge of his desk. His reflection stared back at him from the darkened window, disheveled, pale, eyes wild. "What the hell did I do?" he whispered. In the wildlands, the silver wolf began to run, not away from the kingdom, toward it, and with every step the power inside Nyra grew stronger. The girl they'd rejected was gone. What was coming back? That was something else entirely. Something that would make them regret every cruel word, every dismissive glance, every moment they'd treated her like she was nothing. The broken thing they'd thrown away was returning, and she was hungry for blood. The silver wolf ran through the wildlands like a ghost made flesh. Nyra's paws barely touched the ground, each stride covering impossible distances. The forest blurred around her, trees becoming dark streaks, moonlight fragmenting into silver shards. Her new body moved with a fluidity that felt both alien and instinctive, muscles coiling and releasing with perfect precision. But it wasn't just speed. Power radiated from her in waves. She could feel it pulsing beneath her skin, thrumming in her bones, burning in her blood. Every breath pulled in more of it, drawing from the earth, the air, the shadows themselves. It felt infinite, overwhelming, terrifying. Inside her mind, Nyra's human consciousness struggled to process what she'd become. The wolf's instincts were primal, violent, focused entirely on survival and dominance. It wanted to hunt, to kill, to prove itself superior to everything that had ever looked down on her. And underneath that, rage. So much rage it felt like her chest might explode from containing it. "Slow down," she tried to tell the wolf. The wolf ignored her. It ran harder, faster, pushing their shared body to limits Nyra hadn't known existed. The bond's remnant still burned in her chest. that twisted, damaged thread connecting her to Alaric. But it felt different now, corrupted. What should have been golden warmth had turned to black fire, and it was pulling, not gently, not like before. This pull was violent, demanding, like a fishhook buried deep in her sternum, yanking her toward the palace with force that made her ribs ache. "We need to stop," Nyra thought desperately. "We need to figure out what's happening." The wolf snarled internally. Images flooded Nyra's mind. Alaric's face twisted with disgust, the court's laughter, the feeling of marble biting into her knees as she collapsed. The wolf didn't want to stop. It wanted revenge. Hours passed in a blur of motion and moonlight. When the wolf finally slowed, they were at the edge of a ravine. Water rushed far below, white foam visible even in the darkness. On the opposite side, Nyra could see the lights of a settlement, small, scattered, nothing like the palace's grandeur. A rogue camp. The wolf's lips pulled back from its teeth. "No," Nyra thought, "we're not." Movement in the trees. 3 shapes emerged from the shadows. Wolves, but wrong. Their fur was matted, their eyes wild. Rogues who'd lost themselves to madness and hunger. The largest one, a male with a torn ear, stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice was more growl than words. "Fresh meat." The other 2 spread out, flanking positions. Pack tactics, even without a pack. Muscle memory from lives they'd lost. Nyra felt the wolf's response before she could stop it. The silver wolf dropped into a crouch, shadows gathering around its paws like living things. A sound came from its throat, not a growl, not a snarl, something deeper, older. The 3 rogues froze. The torn-ear male's confidence cracked. "What the fuck?" The silver wolf moved. 1 second it was crouched at the ravine's edge. The next it was on him, jaws clamping around his throat with enough force to crush bone. Blood sprayed hot and metallic. The rogue tried to scream but only managed a gurgling wheeze. Nyra felt everything. The give of flesh between their teeth, the taste of blood flooding their mouth, the satisfying crack of vertebrae separating. Her human mind recoiled in horror. The wolf felt only triumph. The second rogue lunged. The wolf released the first, already dead, already forgotten, and spun with impossible speed. Claws raked across the attacker's face, tearing through skin and muscle and bone. The rogue's jaw hung loose, connected by only a thread of tissue. He dropped, howling. The third rogue ran. The wolf considered chasing him, then dismissed it. Weak prey wasn't worth the effort. Nyra stood over the bodies, blood dripping from silver fur, her chest heaving. The human part of her wanted to vomit. The wolf part wanted to howl victory. What did we just do? The wolf's response was simple. Survived. A sound behind her. Nyra spun, teeth bared, ready to kill again. An old woman stood at the tree line. Human. Or mostly human. Her eyes held the amber glow of a wolf, but her body was bent with age, her hair white as bone. She wore robes that might have been ceremonial once, but were now little more than rags. "Well," the old woman said, her voice like gravel, "that's not something you see every day." Nyra growled. "Easy, child. I'm not here to fight." The woman stepped closer, seeming unconcerned by the blood or the bodies. "Though I must say, you make quite the mess. These rogues were a nuisance, true, but they did occasionally bring me meat." The wolf's instincts screamed danger, but something in the old woman's scent was wrong, not threatening, just other. "You're confused," the woman continued, tilting her head. "New shift, violent emergence, and unless I miss my guess," her nostrils flared. "Recently rejected bond, still bleeding." Nyra's ears flattened against her skull. "Thought so." The woman lowered herself onto a fallen log with a grunt. "You can't talk in that form yet. Most new shifters can't. Takes practice. But you can understand me, yes?" Nyra hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Good. I'm Nyra. I live, well, survive is more accurate, out here in the wildlands. Been doing so for longer than you've been alive." She gestured at Nyra's silver fur. "And in all those years, I've never seen anything like you." The wolf preened slightly at that. "That wasn't a compliment," Nyra said dryly. "You reek of old magic, the kind that got most of my generation killed, the kind that kingdoms fear." Nyra's tail lashed. "You don't know what you are, do you?" Nyra leaned forward, her amber eyes sharp despite her age. They cast you out as wolfless, broken, defective. But you were never broken, child. You were dormant. The word hung in the air. Your wolf wasn't late. It was waiting, gathering strength, and when it finally emerged, she gestured at the dead rogues. Well, you can see the result. Why? Nyra thought desperately. Why now? Because rejection broke something in you that needed breaking, Mira said, as if she'd heard the thought. The bond's severance created a wound, but wounds can be doorways, and yours opened onto something very old. She stood, joints creaking. You're going back, aren't you, to the palace? Nyra hesitated, then nodded. Of course you are. The bond won't let you stay away, damaged or not. And that rage... Mira's expression turned pitying. That rage will drive you straight into the jaws of death if you're not careful. The wolf snarled. Oh, I'm sure you're very powerful, but power without control is just suicide with extra steps. Mira walked to the ravine's edge, looking across at the settlement. You want revenge? Fine. But revenge taken too quickly is revenge wasted. She turned back. 3 days. Give yourself 3 days before you return. Learn your body. Learn your power. Learn what you've become. Then, a smile that was more grimace, then you can burn their world down. Nyra wanted to refuse. The pull toward the palace was excruciating, getting stronger with every passing hour. But somewhere in her human mind, rationality flickered. Mira was right. She had no control. The wolf was driving her body, making decisions, killing without hesitation. If she went back now, she'd be dangerous, but also vulnerable, unpredictable. 3 days, she agreed internally. The wolf resisted, but Nyra pushed back. For the first time since the transformation, she felt her consciousness assert dominance over the beast. 3 days. Grudgingly, the wolf acquiesced. Smart girl, Mira said. Now shift back. You need to learn to control the change, or you'll be trapped in fur when you least want it. Nyra had no idea how to shift back. It's like the first shift, but in reverse, Mira explained. Find the part of you that's human, pull it forward, force the wolf to recede. Easier said than done. Nyra closed her eyes, or the wolf's eyes, and searched inward. The human part of her felt small, fragile, buried under layers of predatory instinct and power. She grasped it anyway, imagining pulling herself up from deep water. The transformation reversed. If the first shift had been agony, this was worse. Her bones cracked and reformed, her muscles tore and rebuilt, her fur retracted like thorns being pulled from flesh. She collapsed to the ground, gasping, her body human again, naked, covered in blood, shaking uncontrollably. That's normal, Mira said, tossing her a bundle of cloth. First few shifts are always rough. You'll adapt. Nyra wrapped the cloth, rough spun wool that smelled of smoke, around herself. Her hands trembled so badly she could barely tie it. The bond, she managed to rasp. Her throat felt raw, damaged from screaming. It's still there. Of course it is, Mira said. Bonds don't die just because someone rejects them. They're soul deep. Only death can truly sever one. But he rejected me. He rejected the bond. Not the same thing. Mira sat back down on her log. The bond exists whether he acknowledges it or not, and now it's damaged, corrupted, turned into something else, but still there, still connecting you. Nyra's hand went to her chest. She could feel it, that black thread pulsing with poison. Can I cut it? Probably not. Severing a bond from your end usually requires help. Powerful magic, experienced healers, rituals that take weeks. Mira's expression turned grim. Or death. Death works too. His or mine. Either. The word hung heavy. Nyra stared at her blood-covered hands. 3 days ago, she'd been a kitchen servant hoping for a miracle. Now she was something else. Something dangerous. Something that terrified her. What am I? She whispered. Mira was quiet for a long moment. Honestly? I don't know. The silver fur, the shadow manipulation, the sheer size. She shook her head. Legend speaks of ancient bloodlines, wolves that were more than wolves. Most were hunted to extinction centuries ago because kingdoms feared what they couldn't control. You think that's what I am? I think you're something that was never supposed to wake up. And now that you have, Nyra met her eyes. Everything changes. The 3 days passed in a haze of pain and discovery. Mira's camp was barely more than a cave and a fire pit, but it was shelter. She provided food, mostly dried meat and foraged roots, and water from a nearby spring. More importantly, she provided instruction. Shift, she'd command at dawn, and Nyra would transform, the process becoming marginally less agonizing each time. Her control improved. The wolf still fought for dominance, but Nyra was learning to wrestle it into submission. Hunt, and Nyra would stalk through the forest, learning to move silently, to track by scent, to kill cleanly. The wolf took joy in it. Nyra tried not to think too hard about what that meant for her humanity. Fight! And Nyra would throw rocks, sticks, once even a flaming branch. Nyra learned to dodge, to counter, to use her size and speed as weapons. The shadows responded to her emotions, gathering when she was angry, dissipating when she was calm. Control the shadows, Nyra said on the second day. Don't let them control you. But controlling them was like grabbing smoke. Nyra stood in wolf form, trying to make the shadows obey. They pooled around her paws, swirled up her legs, but wouldn't solidify, wouldn't become anything useful. You're thinking too hard, Nyra said. Shadows aren't logical. They're emotional, primal. That doesn't help. Nyra threw a rock at her head. Nyra ducked reflexively, and the shadows surged upward, forming a barrier between her and the projectile. The rock bounced off solid darkness. See, Nyra said, instinct, not thought. By the third day, Nyra could shift in under a minute, could fight in either form without losing herself completely to the wolf, could call shadows to defend, to conceal, to strike. But the bond was getting worse. It burned constantly now, a fire in her chest that no amount of cold water could cool. And the pull. God, the pull was unbearable. Every cell in her body screamed to return to the palace, to find Alaric, to complete what had been started, or destroy it completely. Nyra sat by the fire on the third night, human again, wearing clothes Nyra had scrounged from somewhere, rough leather pants, a shirt that was too big, boots that almost fit. She looked like a bandit, felt like a weapon. You're leaving tomorrow, Nyra said. Not a question. Yes. And you have a plan? Not really, Nyra snorted. Figures, youth and stupidity go hand in hand. I need to see him, Nyra said quietly. I need to understand why the bond is still there, why it's doing this. You need closure. I need answers. Those aren't the same thing. Nyra poked at the fire with a stick. But I suppose you'll learn that the hard way. Silence fell between them. Comfortable, or as comfortable as silence could be when everything hurt. Thank you, Nyra finally said, for helping me. Don't thank me yet. What I've taught you might just keep you alive long enough to make terrible decisions. Nyra's expression softened slightly. But you're welcome nonetheless. Why did you help? You don't know me. No. But I know what it's like to be cast out, to be called broken. Nyra's eyes went distant. And I know what it's like to discover you were never broken at all, just inconvenient. Nyra wanted to ask more, but Nyra's expression closed off. Sleep, the old woman commanded. Tomorrow you return to the kingdom that tried to kill you. You'll need your strength. Nyra crossed the boundary at dawn. The white stones that marked the kingdom's edge felt different this time. Less like a barrier, more like a challenge. She was in human form, her silver wolf held carefully in check. The shadows clung to her anyway, darkening the air around her like a personal storm cloud. She couldn't fully suppress them anymore. They responded to her emotions, and right now she was a hurricane of rage and pain and determination. The bond pulled harder with every step. This way. This way. This way. Toward the palace. Toward Alaric. Toward confrontation. Nyra had debated shifting, using her wolf speed to cover the distance quickly. But something told her to walk, to be seen, to let people witness what they'd created. The first settlement she passed through went silent when she entered. Wolves looked up from morning routines, fetching water, tending fires, arguing over nothing. Their conversations died mid-sentence, eyes went wide. Some people actually stepped backward. Nyra didn't slow, didn't acknowledge them, but she felt their fear. It tasted like copper. "What is she?" someone whispered. "The shadows?" "Call the guards." But no guards came. They were too afraid. Nyra walked through the settlement and out the other side without incident. The bond pulled stronger, closer now. The palace was maybe 5 miles away. The second settlement was larger, more organized, and less afraid. Guards stepped into her path as she entered the market square. "Halt!" the lead guard commanded. He was young, maybe 25, with the build of someone who'd trained hard but never fought for real. "State your business." Nyra stopped, looked at him, didn't speak. The shadows swirled darker around her shoulders. "I said state your business," he repeated, but his voice cracked slightly. His hand went to his sword hilt. "I'm passing through," Nyra said quietly. "You're not from this settlement. Where's your pack identification?" "I don't have one." His eyes narrowed. "Rogues aren't allowed in kingdom territory. You know that." "I'm not a rogue." "Then what are you?" "Good question." Nyra tilted her head, studying him. Young, nervous, following orders because that's what young, nervous guards did. "I'm what happens when you throw someone away and they refuse to die," she said softly. The guard blinked. "What?" "Let me pass." "I can't do that. Unidentified wolves need to be processed, registered." I said. Nyra's eyes flashed silver. The shadows surged. "Let me pass." The guard stumbled backward, his hand flying off his sword, as if the metal had burned him. Behind him, the other guard shifted nervously. "You're her," one of them breathed. "The rejected mate. The wolfless girl." The title tasted like ash. "I'm not wolfless anymore," Nyra said. She walked past them. They didn't try to stop her. Word spread faster than she moved. By the time Nyra reached the third settlement, only 2 miles from the palace now, people were lined up along the streets, watching, whispering, not quite hostile, not quite welcoming, afraid. She survived the wildlands. Look at her eyes. The shadows follow her. Someone needs to tell the king. Nyra kept walking. The bond burned hotter. She could feel Alaric now, actually feel him. His confusion, his unease. The faint, unwilling recognition as the bond between them flared with her proximity. He knew she was coming. The palace gates rose before her, massive, iron-reinforced, guarded by 24 warriors in ceremonial armor that hid practical steel underneath. They were expecting her. The gates were closed. The guards stood in formation, weapons drawn but not raised. And standing at the center, Elder Morvieth. The ancient Lycan looked older than he had 3 days ago, tired. His amber eyes tracked Nyra's approach with something that might have been sorrow. "Nyra Vale," he said formally. "Elder, you were exiled. You know you cannot be here." "And yet," Nyra said, stopping 10 feet from the gate, "here I am." Morvith's jaw tightened. "The exile was lawful, decreed by the king himself. If you attempt to enter You'll what? Kill me?" Nyra smiled. It felt wrong on her face. "You can try." The guards shifted, hands tightened on weapons. "I don't want violence," Morvith said quietly, "but I cannot allow you to enter. The king has given explicit orders. The king rejected a bond that refuses to die," Nyra interrupted. "Do you know what that feels like, Elder? To have something carved into your soul and then told it doesn't matter? I know it's painful." "You know nothing." The words came out flat, cold. "But you will. All of you will." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." Silence fell over the courtyard. Then, movement at the palace entrance. A figure emerged onto the balcony overlooking the gates. Alaric. Even from this distance, Nyra could see him clearly. Tall, imposing, dressed in black armor that made him look like death incarnate. His gold eyes found hers across the distance, and the bond erupted. Both of them staggered. Nyra's hand flew to her chest as pain and pleasure and recognition crashed through her in equal measure. The black thread that connected them flared white-hot, pulling so hard she thought it might drag her off her feet. Across the courtyard, Alaric grabbed the balcony railing. His knuckles went white. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then Alaric's expression hardened. "Open the gates," he called down. Morvith turned, shocked. "Your Majesty." "I said open them. She was exiled by your own decree, and now I'm revoking it." Alaric's voice carried absolute authority. "Open the gates and bring her to the throne room, now." The guards hesitated, looking to Morvith. The elder closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. "You heard your king," he said quietly. The gates began to swing open. Nyra walked through. Every guard she passed flinched, not from fear of her necessarily, from the shadows that writhed around her shoulders like living things, from the silver glow in her eyes, from the raw power that rolled off her in waves. She was led through corridors she'd scrubbed 1,000 times as a servant, past chambers where she'd changed sheets and emptied chamber pots. The guards flanking her kept their distance, as if proximity might contaminate them. They reached the throne room. The doors swung open, and there, seated on a throne carved from black stone, was Alaric Virathorn. He'd dismissed everyone. The vast chamber was empty except for the two of them. No guards, no nobles, no witnesses. Just the rejected mate and the king who'd broken her. Nyra walked forward until she stood in the center of the ceremonial circle, the same place she'd knelt 3 days ago, the same place the Bond had recognized them, the same place he'd destroyed her. "You're alive," Alaric said. His voice was rougher than she remembered, strained. "Disappointed?" Nyra asked. Confused. He stood descending the throne steps slowly. "The bond. It should have killed you. Rejected bonds always—" "Kill the weak," Nyra finished. "I know. Everyone knows." She watched him approach, studied the lines of tension around his eyes, the way his jaw clenched, the careful control in his movements. "But I didn't die," she continued. "Turns out I'm not as weak as you thought." Alaric stopped 10 feet away. His eyes traced over her, the leather clothes, the silver glow in her eyes, the shadows that moved independently of any light source. "What happened to you?" "You rejected me," Nyra said simply, "and something inside me that was sleeping woke up. Your wolf. Among other things." She took a step toward him. The shadows surged forward with her, darkening the space between them. Alaric's hand went to his sword instinctively. Nyra smiled. "Going to reject me again? Kill me this time to finish the job?" "I don't want to kill you." "No? Then what do you want?" His jaw worked. For a moment she thought he might not answer. "I want to understand," he finally said. "I want to know why the bond won't die. Why it's burning in my chest every goddamn second. Why I can feel you even when you're miles away. Maybe the universe has a sense of humor." "This isn't funny." "No," Nyra agreed. Her smile faded. "It's torture. For both of us, apparently." They stared at each other. The bond pulled, screamed, demanding they move closer, touch, complete what had been interrupted. Neither of them moved. "I felt it," Alaric said quietly. "That night, when the bond recognized you, I felt something I'd never felt before, something that terrified me. So you destroyed it. So I tried to destroy it." His hand dropped from his sword. "You were wolfless, powerless. Everything I'd been taught said you couldn't possibly be my mate, that the bond had made a mistake. And now? Now she was standing in his throne room with shadows swirling around her like a personal storm, her eyes burning silver, power radiating from every pore. "Now," Alaric said slowly, "I think maybe I made the mistake." The admission hung in the air between them. Nyra felt something crack in her chest. Not the bond, something else. The armor she'd built around her rage. "You humiliated me," she whispered. "In front of everyone. You looked at me like I was garbage." "I know. You cast me out to die." "I know. And now you want— what? Forgiveness? A second chance?" Alaric's eyes flashed gold. "I want to understand why the fuck the bond won't let me forget you." "That's not my problem." "It's both our problems." He took a step closer. The bond flared, pulling harder. "Like it or not, we're connected, and until we figure out how to sever this completely—" "I don't want to sever it." The words surprised them both. Alaric froze. "What?" Nyra moved closer, letting the shadows spiral outward, filling the space between them with darkness. You heard me. I don't want to sever it. I want you to feel everything I felt, every second of agony, every moment of humiliation, every breath of pain. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. I want you to suffer. They were less than a foot apart now, close enough that she could see the flecks of bronze in his gold eyes, close enough to smell him, leather and steel and something darker, something that made her wolf stir with interest. I'm not your victim, Alaric growled. No, Nyra agreed. You're my mate, whether you like it or not. His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. The touch sent electricity crackling through the bond, making them both gasp. Don't, he warned. Don't what? Nyra leaned closer, close enough that their breaths mingled. Don't remind you that you felt the bond too? That for one perfect moment you recognized me as yours before your pride got in the way? That's not… You wanted someone powerful, Nyra interrupted. Someone worthy. Someone who could stand beside you without embarrassment. She pulled her wrist free from his grip. Well, congratulations. You got your wish. I'm powerful now. More powerful than half your council. More powerful than you probably realize. And you think that changes anything? I think… Nyra stepped back, putting distance between them before the bond's pull made her do something stupid. I think you made your choice. You rejected me when I was weak. You don't get to claim me now that I'm strong. She turned toward the door. Where are you going? Alaric demanded. Anywhere but here. You can't just walk away. Nyra looked back over her shoulder. Watch me. The bond will torture us both, equally, forever. She smiled, and this time it was all teeth. Welcome to the consequences of your actions, Your Majesty. She walked toward the door, made it 3 steps before Alaric's voice stopped her. I'm sorry. 2 words. Quiet, raw. Nyra's hand paused on the door handle. I'm sorry, he repeated. For everything. For the rejection. For the humiliation. For casting you out. For… His voice cracked slightly. For hurting you. Nyra didn't turn around. Sorry doesn't fix this, she said. I know. Sorry doesn't undo what you did. I know that too. Silence. Then, but it's a start, Alaric continued. If you'll let it be. Nyra's fingers tightened on the door handle. Every instinct screamed at her to leave, to walk away, to let him suffer alone. But the bond, the goddamn bond wouldn't let her. It pulled, begged, demanded she turn around, accept his apology, give them both relief from this agony. 3 days, she said without turning. I survived 3 days in the wildlands, learned to control my wolf, learned what I'd become. Do you know what I thought about every single second? Tell me. Revenge. Nyra finally turned to face him. I thought about coming back here and burning everything down, making you watch as I destroyed everything you built, making you feel powerless. Alaric's expression didn't change. And now? Now I'm standing here and I realize revenge won't fix what's broken. She released the door handle. But neither will sorry. Then what will? I don't know. Nyra moved back toward the center of the room, not close to him, but not leaving either. That's what we need to figure out. We? Unless you want this, she gestured between them at the invisible thread connecting their chests, to drive us both insane. Alaric studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. What do you want? Answers. Nyra crossed her arms. Starting with why you really rejected me. And don't give me that you were wolfless bullshit. The bond recognized us. You felt it. I felt it. For those 90 seconds we both knew. His jaw clenched. So tell me, Nyra pressed, what were you really afraid of? The silence stretched. Alaric walked to the throne, but didn't sit. Just stood beside it, one hand on the armrest, his back partially to her. You want the truth? He finally said. That's generally what answers require. The truth is, he laughed, bitter. The truth is, I was afraid you'd make me weak. Nyra's eyebrows rose. I've spent my entire life building power, Alaric continued, consolidating control, eliminating threats, being strong enough that no one would dare challenge me. And then you… He turned to face her. You walked into that hall, Small, fragile, wolfless, and the bond recognized you anyway. So? So I looked at you and saw everything I'd fought to avoid. Weakness, vulnerability. Someone I'd have to protect instead of someone who could stand beside me in battle. His hands clenched into fists. I saw my greatest fear. That I'd make you look weak. That I'd become weak. Caring about someone fragile. Worrying about them. Letting emotions compromise judgment. He met her eyes. Love is weakness. I've seen it destroy alphas. Make them hesitate. Make them soft. Make them fall. Nyra felt something cold settle in her stomach. So you rejected me to protect yourself? Yes. The honesty was somehow worse than the rejection. And now? She asked. Now that I'm not fragile? Now that I have power? Alaric's expression shifted. Something hungry flickered in his eyes. Now, he said slowly, you're exactly what I thought I wanted. The words should have felt like victory. They felt like poison. But you still don't actually want me, Nyra said quietly. You want what I've become. The power. The strength. Not the person underneath. That's not... It is. She shook her head. You rejected the real me. The weak me. The vulnerable me. Everything I actually was. And now you're interested because I'm useful. You're my mate. I'm your weapon. Nyra laughed, and the sound echoed off the throne room's vaulted ceiling. That's all you see, isn't it? Another tool to consolidate power. Another asset to strengthen your position. That's not fair. Fair? Nyra's voice rose. You want to talk about fair? You destroyed me 3 days ago, literally left me to die. And now you're standing here acting like we can just... What? Pick up where we left off? Pretend the rejection never happened? I said I was sorry, and I said sorry doesn't fix this. She moved closer to him, letting the shadows surge forward. You broke something fundamental when you rejected the bond. You can't just glue it back together with apologies and changed circumstances. Alaric's eyes narrowed. Then what do you want from me? I want you to admit that you'll never actually love me, that all you care about is power, that even now, even with this bond burning in both our chests, you're calculating how to use me rather than how to cherish me. The accusation hung between them like a blade. Alaric's expression went carefully blank. See? Nyra said softly. You can't even deny it. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? She stepped closer still, close enough to see his pulse jump in his throat. Then look me in the eye and tell me you love me. Tell me you'd choose me if I was still wolfless. Tell me I matter more than the power I bring. Alaric's jaw worked, but no words came out. Nyra felt something inside her chest crack completely. Not the bond. That was still there. Still burning, still pulling. This was something else. Some last shred of hope she hadn't realized she was holding. That's what I thought, she whispered. She turned toward the door again. This time, Alaric grabbed her arm. Don't walk away from me. His voice carried command. Alpha dominance, the kind of order that made lesser wolves submit automatically. Nyra's wolf snarled to the surface. Her eyes flashed pure silver. Shadows exploded outward, slamming Alaric backward. He hit the throne with enough force to crack the stone. Don't, Nyra growled, her voice layered with the wolf's deeper tones. Ever give me orders again. Alaric pushed himself upright, and for the first time since she'd entered the throne room, she saw real anger in his eyes. You're in my kingdom, he said softly, dangerously, under my law. You don't get to cheat. I get to do whatever I want. Nyra let the wolf rise closer to the surface, let her power fill the room until the very air felt heavy with it. Because you made me this. You cast me out. You forced me to survive. You created something you can't control. They faced each other across the throne room. King and rejected mate. Alpha. And whatever Nyra had become. The bond screamed between them, demanding resolution, demanding union, demanding they stop fighting and just give in. Neither of them moved. This won't work, Alaric finally said. No, Nyra agreed. It won't. But we're stuck with each other. Seems that way. Another silence. Then Alaric did something unexpected. He laughed. The sound was bitter, exhausted, but genuine. This is insane, he said. The bond literally chose the one person who hates me most. Can you blame me? No. He rubbed his face with both hands. No, I really can't. Nyra felt her rage deflate slightly. Not disappear. It would never disappear, but diminish enough to think. What happens now? She asked. I don't know. Alaric looked at her, and for once he seemed almost vulnerable. I've never dealt with a bond this broken. Welcome to new territory. You're enjoying this. A little. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. Then his expression sobered. I meant it, he said quietly. The apology. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know I regret what I did. Nyra studied him, searching for lies, for manipulation, finding only exhaustion and, maybe, truth. Noted, she finally said. What will you do, now that you're back? I haven't decided. Nyra glanced around the throne room. Part of me wants to leave again, go back to the wildlands, let you suffer with the bond alone. And the other part? Wants to stay and make you pay for what you did. She met his eyes. Every single day. That sounds like torture. It will be, for both of us. Alaric considered this, then nodded slowly. The court will expect an explanation. For your return. For what you are. Tell them the truth. That I rejected my mate and she came back more powerful than me? Is that not what happened? His jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. There will be challenges, he warned. Nobles who see you as a threat. Warriors who will want to test you. Council members who will demand you be exiled again. Let them try. The words carried absolute certainty. Alaric's eyes flashed with something that might have been respect or arousal. With alphas, the line was often thin. You've changed, he said. You killed who I was. This is what survived. I don't know if I like it. Nyra smiled. I don't care. She finally released the door handle she'd been gripping, walked back toward the center of the room, stopped directly in front of Alaric, close enough that the bond pulled almost painfully. I'll stay, she said. For now, not for you. Not even for the bond. But because I'm tired of running. Tired of being powerless. Tired of letting others decide my worth. And what do you want in return? Everything. Nyra let the word hang. I want a voice in your council. A position that doesn't involve scrubbing floors. Recognition that I'm more than just a rejected mate who got lucky. That's not how this works. Then make it work. You're the king. Her eyes flashed silver. Or admit you're too weak to stand beside someone as strong as me. The challenge was deliberate, calculating. Alaric's nostrils flared, his hands clenched. The alpha in him bristled at being challenged. But underneath that, interest. You want power, he said slowly. I want what I deserve. And you think you deserve to sit on my council? To have equal voice with nobles who've served this kingdom for centuries? I think I survived what should have killed me. I think I have power your council can't match. I think I'm your mate, whether you like it or not. Nyra leaned closer. And I think you're smart enough to recognize an asset when it's standing in front of you. Alaric stared at her. She could see the calculation happening behind his eyes, weighing options, measuring risk. This won't be easy, he finally said. Nothing worth having is. The court will resist. Let them. You'll make enemies. I already have enemies. Nyra gestured vaguely at the palace around them. Every person who laughed when you rejected me. Every noble who called me wolfless trash. Every servant who looked down on me. I'm not here to make friends. Then what are you here for? Survival. The word came out harder than she'd intended. And maybe, eventually, something more. But that depends entirely on you. On me? On whether you can learn to see me as more than a weapon, more than an asset, more than something to be used. Nyra held his gaze. On whether you can actually give a shit about the person underneath the power. The question hung between them, unanswered, because neither of them knew if Alaric was capable of that. Finally, he nodded. You'll have a seat on the council. Provisional. We'll see how it goes. Not provisional? Permanent. Nyra seen permanent? She repeated. Or I walk, and you can suffer with the bond on your own. His jaw clenched so hard she heard teeth grind, but he nodded. Fine. Permanent seat. But you follow protocol. Respect chain of command. Don't undermine my authority. I won't undermine you unless you deserve it. That's not comforting. It's honest. Alaric closed his eyes briefly, took a breath. When he opened them again, he'd regained some of his composure. We're going to destroy each other, he said quietly. Probably, Nyra agreed, and neither of us is going to walk away. The bond won't let us. I hate this. So do I. They stood there in the throne room, two broken people connected by something neither of them wanted, both too stubborn to surrender, both too damaged to properly heal. The bond pulsed between them, pulling, demanding. Neither gave in. Finally, Alaric stepped back. I'll have chambers prepared for you. And clothes, real clothes, not... He gestured at her rough leather, whatever that is. Don't trouble yourself. It's not trouble, it's necessity. If you're joining the council, you need to look the part. Nyra wanted to argue, but he was right. Fine. The council meets tomorrow at dawn. I'll introduce you then. Looking forward to it. The sarcasm was thick enough to cut. Alaric almost smiled. Almost. This is going to be a disaster, he muttered. Yes, Nyra agreed, but at least it'll be an interesting disaster. She turned toward the door one final time. This time, he didn't stop her. She made it all the way to the corridor before his voice called out. Nyra. She paused, looked back. Alaric stood in the center of his throne room, looking somehow smaller than before, more human. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I'm glad you didn't die. The admission cost him something. Nyra could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the slight crack in his armor. For what it's worth, she replied, I'm not sure I am. She left him standing there, alone with his regrets, and the bond that would never let either of them forget what they'd lost, what they'd broken. The chambers they'd prepared for Nyra overlooked the eastern gardens. She stood at the window watching dawn break over manicured hedges and carefully tended flower beds. Everything here was controlled, cultivated. Nothing wild allowed to exist within the palace walls. She'd barely slept. The bond kept her awake, pulsing with Alaric's presence somewhere in the palace above her. She could feel him, restless, troubled, unable to find peace either. Good. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Enter, she called without turning. A servant girl entered, arms laden with fabric. She couldn't have been more than 16, her eyes wide as she took in Nyra's appearance, still wearing the rough leather from yesterday, shadows still clinging to her shoulders like a second skin. His Majesty sent these, my lady. The girl's voice trembled slightly. For the council meeting, Nyra turned. The servant flinched. Just set them down, Nyra said quietly. The girl practically threw the clothes onto the bed and fled. Nyra examined what Alaric had sent. Fine fabrics, deep charcoal gray and silver threading, well made but not ostentatious, the kind of thing a council member might wear. Practical, authoritative. She hated that he'd chosen well. An hour later, dressed and armored in more ways than one, Nyra made her way to the council chambers. Guards lined the corridor. They tracked her movement with barely concealed wariness. Word had spread fast. The rejected mate had returned, stronger than before, and the king himself had given her a seat at his table. The council chamber doors stood open. Nyra entered to find 12 pairs of eyes fixed on her with varying degrees of hostility. The chamber itself was circular, dominated by a massive oak table. Alaric sat at the head, his expression carefully neutral. Around the table, nobles, warriors, advisors, the people who actually ran the kingdom while their king played at absolute power. Elder Morvith sat at Alaric's right hand. His ancient eyes met Nyra's with something that might have been sympathy or pity. Gentlemen, Alaric said, his voice cutting through the murmurs, and Lady Celestine, may I introduce Nyra Vale? She'll be joining our council effective immediately. Silence. Then, you cannot be serious. The speaker was a broad-shouldered man with a gray beard and scars that suggested a lifetime of combat. Commander Thane, if Nyra remembered correctly, head of the kingdom's military forces. I'm completely serious, Alaric replied evenly. She was rejected 3 days ago. Lady Celestine's voice dripped venom. The same noble who'd smiled during Nyra's humiliation, cast out as wolfless, and now you bring her back to sit on our council? What madness is this? Watch your tone, Alaric warned. I'll watch nothing. Celestine stood, her chair scraping against stone. This is an insult to everyone who served this kingdom with loyalty and distinction. To give her, a servant, a reject, a nobody, equal voice with us? Sit down. The command carried alpha weight. Celestine sat, but her eyes promised murder. Nyra is my mate, Alaric continued. Whether the bond was initially rejected or not, it exists, and she's proven herself more powerful than most wolves in this room. She deserves a seat. Deserves? Another council member, Lord Rothman, master of the kingdom's finances, sneered. She deserves nothing but what she was given 3 days ago. Exile. Nyra had remained silent until now, watching, listening, learning who her enemies were. Now she moved. She didn't walk to the empty chair Alaric had indicated. Instead, she circled the table slowly, letting shadows trail in her wake. Let them see. Let them fear. You're right, she said quietly. I was rejected, cast out, left to die in the wildlands like garbage. She stopped behind Celestine's chair. And yet here I am, alive, stronger, more dangerous than any of you can comprehend. Nyra leaned down, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. So the question isn't whether I deserve this seat. The question is whether you deserve to keep yours. Celestine's hand went to the knife at her belt. Try it, Nyra murmured. Please. Enough! Alaric's voice cracked like a whip. Nyra, take your seat. Celestine, remove your hand from that blade or lose it. Celestine's hand dropped. Nyra moved to the empty chair, placed directly across from Alaric. She sat with deliberate slowness, letting her gaze sweep the table. 12 council members. 12 people who needed to accept her or be broken. Now, Alaric continued, his tone suggesting the matter was closed. We have actual business to discuss. Reports have been coming in from the Western Territories. Rogue activity is increasing. Commander Thane, your assessment? Thane glared at Nyra before responding. The rogues are organizing, forming packs. We've lost 3 patrols in the last month. Organizing how? Alaric leaned forward. Someone's leading them. Someone with enough power to keep their madness in check long enough to coordinate attacks. Nyra felt something cold settle in her stomach. She'd seen the rogues in the wildlands. They were animals, driven by hunger and rage, incapable of cooperation. Unless something had changed. Do we know who? Alaric asked. No, but whoever it is, they're strong. Alpha level at minimum. Thane's eyes flickered to Nyra. Maybe stronger. The implication hung in the air. You think I'm leading them? Nyra asked softly. You survived 3 days in the wildlands, alone, wolfless, or so we thought. Thane's voice hardened. Now you return with power that shouldn't exist. What are we supposed to think? That's enough, Alaric snapped. Is it? Celestine jumped in. She appears from the wildlands at the exact moment rogue attacks increase? That's not coincidence. I wasn't leading rogues, Nyra said. Her voice stayed level, controlled. I was learning not to die. Convenient. True. Morvith cleared his throat. Perhaps we should focus on solutions rather than accusations. If the rogues are organizing, we need to address it, send more patrols, reinforce the borders. That's treating symptoms, Lord Rothman interjected. We need to eliminate the source, find whoever's leading them, and cut off the head. Agreed, Alaric said. Thane, double the patrols. I want scouts in the wildlands identifying rogue camps. And I want this leader found. What about her? Celestine gestured at Nyra. She has first-hand knowledge of the wildlands now. Perhaps she should lead the investigation. The suggestion was poisoned honey. Nyra saw it immediately. Send her back to the wildlands, away from the palace, away from Alaric. Maybe she'd die. Maybe she'd prove herself useful. Either way, Celestine won. No, Alaric said flatly. No? Celestine's eyebrows rose. If she's truly as powerful as you claim, surely she's capable of… I said no. Nyra stays here. Why? Because the bond won't let you send her away. Rothman's voice carried open mockery. How touching. The mighty king, leashed by a connection he himself rejected. Alaric's hands flattened on the table. "You're testing my patience. And you're testing ours." Rothman leaned back in his chair. "This council exists to advise you, to provide guidance, but you're making decisions based on personal feelings rather than kingdom welfare. My personal feelings are none of your concern. They are when they compromise your judgment." Rothman gestured around the table. "Look at us. We're the people who've kept this kingdom running for decades, and you're throwing us aside for a girl you rejected 3 days ago because now she's suddenly convenient." The words hit harder than Nyra expected, because they were partially true. Alaric hadn't wanted her when she was weak, only when she became useful. She saw Alaric's jaw clench, saw the muscle tick in his temple. "This discussion is over," he said coldly. "Nyra has a seat on this council. That's final. If you cannot accept it, you're welcome to resign." Silence. No one resigned, but the hostility in the room thickened until Nyra could taste it. The meeting continued, reports on crop yields, trade negotiations, minor territorial disputes. Nyra listened more than she spoke, filing away information about how the kingdom actually functioned. But underneath the mundane business, tension coiled, ready to strike. It did so 2 hours later. "One more item," Morvith said as the meeting drew to a close. His voice carried reluctance. "There's been a formal challenge filed." Alaric's eyes narrowed. "What kind of challenge?" "To Nyra's position on this council, Lady Celestine has invoked the right of trial." Nyra's attention sharpened. The right of trial was an ancient law. If a council member's fitness was questioned, they could be challenged to combat. Winner kept their seat. Loser. Well, losers rarely survived. "I invoke it," Celestine said, standing. "Nyra Vale's presence on this council is an insult to tradition and common sense. I challenge her, tomorrow at dawn, combat to first blood, or death, if she prefers." Nyra stood slowly. "I accept." "Wait," Alaric began. "I said I accept." Nyra's eyes never left Celestine's. "Tomorrow at dawn. I'll be there." Celestine smiled. "I look forward to it." The council adjourned. Nyra was halfway to the door when Alaric caught her arm. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "About what?" "Your council member trying to kill me?" "Seems straightforward." "Celestine is a trained warrior. She's killed 17 opponents in formal challenges. She won't hold back." "Good. Neither will I." "Nyra, She pulled her arm free. "Don't. You gave me this seat. Now I have to defend it. That's how this works." "You don't have to accept every challenge thrown at you." "Yes, I do. If I refuse, they'll think I'm weak. And if they think I'm weak, this seat means nothing." She met his eyes. "You want me on your council? Then let me prove I belong there." Alaric's jaw worked. "If you die, the bond will probably kill you too. I know. Incentive not to lose." She left him standing there. The next morning came too fast. Nyra stood in the training yard wearing leather armor someone had provided. Light, flexible, designed for movement rather than protection. The kind gladiators wore when the audience wanted to see blood. The yard was packed. Word had spread. The rejected mate versus the king's former favorite. Half the palace had turned out to watch. Celestine entered from the opposite side. She wore similar armor but carried a sword that had clearly seen extensive use. Nicks in the blade. Worn grip. A weapon that had tasted blood before. Nyra had no weapon. She didn't need one. "The challenge is issued and accepted," Elder Morvith announced from the sidelines. He looked older this morning. Tired. "Combat until first blood or surrender. Should either combatant die, it will be considered lawful and no blood debt incurred. Agreed?" "Agreed," Celestine said. "Agreed," Nyra echoed. Alaric stood in the crowd. She could feel his eyes on her, feel the bond pulling taut with tension. She ignored it. "Begin," Morvith called. Celestine attacked immediately. She was fast, faster than Nyra expected. The sword whistled through the air, aimed at Nyra's throat. A killing blow from the start. Nyra dodged left. The blade missed by inches. Celestine spun, bringing the sword around in a backhand slash. Nyra ducked under it, shadows gathering around her hands instinctively. "You're fast," Celestine acknowledged. For someone who's never trained. You talk too much, Nyra replied. Celestine lunged. Nyra sidestepped, but the blade caught her arm, a shallow cut, barely more than a scratch. First blood, the crowd murmured. That's the match, Morvith called. First blood to Lady Celestine. But Celestine didn't lower her sword. No, she said. To death. And she struck again. Nyra's wolf erupted. She didn't fully shift, no time, but her eyes flashed silver, her canines elongated, and shadows exploded outward like a shockwave. Celestine flew backward, hitting the yard's stone wall with enough force to crack it. The crowd went silent. Celestine pushed herself up, blood trickling from her mouth. So it's true. You really are a monster. Takes one to know one, Nyra said. They came together in a blur of motion. Celestine's blade met Shadow Claw's. Steel sparked against darkness. They moved around the yard in a deadly dance, Celestine pressing with technique and experience, Nyra countering with raw power and instinct. Blood sprayed. Nyra felt cuts open on her ribs, her shoulder, her thigh. But she was landing hits too. Shadow Claws raked across Celestine's face, her chest, her arms. The fight devolved into brutality. No more technique, no more strategy, just violence. Celestine slammed Nyra into the ground, raised her sword for a killing blow. Nyra's shadows surged upward, wrapping around Celestine's throat like a garrote. The noble's eyes went wide. She clawed at her neck, at the darkness choking her. Yield! Nyra growled. Celestine shook her head. Then die. The shadows tightened. Celestine's face turned purple. Her sword clattered from her grip. Stop! Alaric's voice cracked across the yard. Nyra looked up, found him pushing through the crowd, his expression caught between fury and something else. Let her go, he commanded. She challenged to death. And you've won. Let her go. Nyra held his gaze, saw the order there, the expectation of obedience. The wolf inside her snarled, but she released the shadows. Celestine collapsed, gasping, her hands at her bruised throat. The crowd erupted in chaos, some cheering, some shouting in outrage, everyone talking at once. Nyra stood in the center of it all, bleeding from a dozen cuts, shadows still writhing around her like living things. The challenge is satisfied, Morvith announced, his voice barely audible over the din. Nyra Vale retains her council seat. Celestine was helped from the yard by attendants. She didn't look at Nyra as she left, but Nyra heard her whisper to one of the attendants, "This isn't over. Punch back." That evening, Nyra sat in her chambers, having her wounds tended by a healer who couldn't quite hide her fear. The cuts weren't deep. They'd heal in a day or two, but they hurt like hell. A knock at the door. The healer fled before Nyra could tell her to stay. Alaric entered without waiting for permission. "You should have killed her," he said without preamble. Nyra looked up. "You told me to stop. I know what I said. I'm telling you what you should have done." He crossed to her window, looking out at the darkening gardens. "Mercy is weakness in this court. Celestine will see it as such. Is that why you rejected me? Because mercy is weakness?" The question hung between them. Alaric turned. "That was different. Was it? You showed me no mercy, threw me away when I was vulnerable, but now you're angry I showed someone else mercy? Celestine isn't some helpless victim. She's a viper, and you just let her keep her fangs. So I should have killed her to prove I'm strong enough to sit at your table?" Nyra stood, ignoring the pain in her ribs. "That's your vision of leadership? Murder anyone who questions you? It's not murder if they challenge first. It's still death. And death is sometimes necessary." Alaric's voice hardened. "You can't be soft here, Nyra. This council will eat you alive if you show weakness." "I'm not being soft. I'm being strategic. Killing Celestine would have made enemies of everyone loyal to her. Now she's humiliated, and I'm merciful. Which do you think wins more support?" Alaric studied her. "When did you get so calculating?" "When I had to survive alone in the wildlands." Nyra moved closer to him. "You forget. I spent 3 days with nothing but my rage to keep me company. I learned a lot about myself, about what I'm willing to do, about what lines I won't cross." "And mercy is your line?" "Unnecessary killing is my line. There's a difference." They stood close enough that the bond pulsed between them, pulling, always pulling. You're going to get yourself killed, Alaric said quietly. Worried? The bond means if you die, I probably do too. So, yes, selfishly worried. Nyra laughed. The sound was brittle. At least you're honest about it. His jaw clenched. I didn't mean it like that. Didn't you? Silence. Then, I don't know how to do this, Alaric admitted. He gestured between them. Whatever this is, I've never had to consider anyone else's well-being before. Never had to care if someone lived or died. Sounds lonely. It was safer. Safe and lonely. What a kingdom you've built. The words were cruel. Nyra saw them land, saw him flinch. But she didn't take them back. You should rest, Alaric finally said. The council meets again in 2 days. Try not to make more enemies before then. He left. Nyra stood alone in her chambers, the bond aching in her chest like an infected wound. Tig. The next day brought news. A patrol had found something in the wildlands. A rogue camp. But different. Organized, controlled. And at its center, bodies. Nyra stood in the council chamber listening to Commander Thane's report with growing dread. 17 dead, Thane said. All killed the same way. Throats torn out. But the wounds, he paused. They're precise. Clean. Not the work of mindless rogues. Show her the bodies, Rothman said. Since she's so familiar with the wildlands, it was a trap. Nyra knew it, but she couldn't refuse without seeming guilty. They brought her to the palace mortuary. The bodies were laid out on stone slabs covered with sheets. Thane pulled back the first sheet. Nyra's stomach turned. The victim's throat was indeed torn out, but the kill was surgical, professional. Notice anything? Thane asked. Nyra leaned closer. There, in the wound pattern. Something familiar, claw marks. Silver fur caught in the torn flesh. Her silver fur. No? She breathed. Thane pulled back another sheet. Same wound, same silver fur. And another, and another. Every body bore evidence that pointed directly to her. This is a setup, Nyra said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Someone's framing me. Convenient defense, Rothman said from the doorway. Or perhaps the truth is simpler. You've been leading the rogues all along, building your power base while pretending to be the victim. That's insane. Is it? You're the only silver wolf anyone's ever seen. These kills bear your signature. Rothman stepped into the mortuary. The evidence is quite damning. Alaric stood beside him, his expression unreadable. Well, Rothman prompted. What say you, Your Majesty? Your mate appears to be a mass murderer. How do you intend to handle this? Nyra's eyes found Alaric's, searching for what? Support? Belief? Trust? She found nothing. His face was stone. Alaric, she said quietly, you can't actually believe. The evidence speaks for itself, he said. The words hit like a physical blow. You're joking. I don't joke about 17 dead wolves. I didn't kill them. Then explain the silver fur. Explain the claw pattern. Explain how every wound perfectly matches your wolf's signature. His voice rose. Explain how you survived 3 days in the wildlands without encountering these rogues you claim to know nothing about. I didn't know. I was alone. Nyra stopped, forced herself to breathe. There has to be another explanation. Such as? Someone with power over illusions. Someone who can manipulate evidence. Someone who wants me gone badly enough to murder 17 wolves and frame me for it. She looked around the room. Someone on your council, maybe? The accusation landed like a grenade. Careful, Celestine said from the shadows. Nyra hadn't noticed her there. That sounds like paranoia, or pattern recognition. Nyra turned to face her. You tried to kill me yesterday. When that failed, suddenly there's evidence I'm a murderer? Interesting timing. I was in the palace all day, Celestine said smoothly. Dozens of witnesses can confirm it. Then someone working with you. Do you hear yourself? Rothman shook his head. The girl's delusional, probably driven mad by the wildlands. We should have left her there. Maybe you should have, Nyra snapped. Would have saved everyone the trouble. Enough! Alaric's voice cut through the argument. Nyra, until we determine what actually happened, you're confined to your chambers, under guard. The world tilted. You're imprisoning me? I'm protecting you, and protecting the kingdom from potential threat. His expression gave nothing away. If you're innocent, investigation will prove it. If you're guilty. If I'm guilty, what? You'll execute me? Your mate? Nyra laughed, and the sound echoed off the mortuary's stone walls. That'll solve your bond problem nicely. This isn't about the bond. Everything is about the bond, her voice cracked. You rejected me because I was weak. Now you're imprisoning me because I'm strong. There's no version of me you actually want, is there? Alaric's jaw clenched, but he didn't deny it. Take her to her chambers, he told the guards. No visitors, no exceptions. Guards moved forward. Nyra didn't resist. What was the point? As they led her from the mortuary, she looked back once. Alaric stood among the bodies, his expression carefully blank. But the bond screamed with his doubt, his confusion, his inability to trust her, or himself, yet. 3 days. Nyra spent 3 days locked in her chambers. No visitors, no information, just guards outside her door and the bond burning in her chest like acid. She could feel Alaric through it, feel his conflict, his suspicion, his anger, but also, underneath, doubt. Not about her guilt, about his own judgment. On the 4th day, the door opened. Elder Morvith entered, looking older than death. We need to talk, he said quietly. Nyra stood from where she'd been sitting by the window. Has the investigation found anything? In a manner of speaking, Morvith gestured for her to sit. You should prepare yourself. Cold dread settled in her stomach. What did you find? Morvith reached into his robes and pulled out a small glass vial. Inside, silver fur, her fur. This was found in your chambers, hidden in the mattress. Nyra's blood went cold. I've never seen that before. There's more. A journal. Also hidden here. Detailing plans to organize the rogues. Overthrow the kingdom. Detailed accounts of the 17 murders. That's not mine. It's in your handwriting. The room spun. That's impossible. I've never... Nyra stood, her hands shaking. Someone planted it. Someone who can forge, who has access to my chambers. Who? Morvith asked gently. Who has that kind of access? Who has the skill? I don't know, but it wasn't me. The council has seen the evidence. They're calling for execution. Execution. The word hung in the air like a noose. And Alaric? Nyra whispered. Morvith's expression turned pitying. He's calling for it loudest of all. The betrayal hit harder than any physical blow. He actually believes I did this. He believes the evidence, and the evidence is damning. Morvith moved closer. There's only one way out of this. What? Confess. Claim madness from the bond's rejection. Beg for mercy. Perhaps he'll exile you instead of execution. I didn't do anything. Then you'll die protesting your innocence. Is that preferable? Nyra sank back into her chair. Her mind raced, searching for options, finding none. She was trapped. Perfectly, completely trapped. Someone had orchestrated this with surgical precision, planted evidence, forged documents, murdered 17 wolves and made it look like her work. But who? And why? I need time, she said. You don't have time. The trial is tomorrow at dawn. Confess or face execution. Morvith stood. I'm sorry, child, truly, but those are your only choices. He left. Nyra sat alone in her chambers, the bond burning in her chest, her mind spinning. Tomorrow at dawn. Trial and execution. Unless she confessed to crimes she didn't commit. The shadows gathered around her automatically, responding to her rage and fear. Outside her window, the blood moon was rising again. How fitting. Her story had begun under a blood moon. Maybe it would end under one too. Unless... Nyra stood slowly. There was one other option. Escape. She moved to the window, testing the frame. Locked. But locks were just metal, and shadow could cut through metal. She'd have to fight her way out, past guards, through the palace, into the wildlands. Become the rogue they already thought she was. Leave Alaric, leave the bond, leave everything, or die trying. Her hands pressed against the window frame. The bond pulled, screaming at her not to run, not to leave him. But he'd already left her, believed lies over truth, chosen evidence over trust, proven once again that she meant nothing to him beyond what she could provide. Nyra's claws extended, shadow and bone. She raised them to the window lock, then paused. If she ran, she'd never clear her name, never find who framed her, never get justice. She'd be hunted forever. But if she stayed, death was almost certain. "Damn it," she whispered. The bond pulsed, and somewhere in the palace above she felt Alaric falter, felt his certainty crack, felt him wonder, just for a moment, if he'd made a terrible mistake. Nyra's claws hovered over the lock. Run or stay. Live as a fugitive or die as a martyr. Neither option was good. Both would break her in different ways. The blood moon hung fat and red in the sky, watching, waiting, for her to decide what kind of person she truly was, the kind who ran when cornered. Nyra's claws touched the window lock, then withdrew. Running would prove them right, would validate every lie they'd told about her, would let whoever framed her win completely. And she was done letting people destroy her without a fight. She turned from the window, her mind crystallizing around a single truth. If she was going to die tomorrow, she'd die exposing the bastard who'd orchestrated this. The shadows around her pulsed with violent agreement. Nyra closed her eyes, reaching inward to her wolf. The beast stirred immediately, eager for blood. For 3 days it had been caged in this room, restless and furious. "We need to think," Nyra told it, "not just react." The wolf snarled internally, but didn't fight her. Someone had planted evidence in her room. Someone with access to the palace, to her chambers specifically. Someone who could forge her handwriting, acquire her fur, orchestrate murders in the wildlands while maintaining an alibi here. That required resources. Power, connections. Someone on the council. Nyra opened her eyes. She moved to the door, pressing her ear against the wood. 2 guards outside. She could hear their breathing, smell their nervous sweat. They were afraid of her. Good. She knocked. "What?" one of them called through the door. "I need to speak with Elder Morvith. It's urgent." "You're not allowed visitors." "Then get him a message. Tell him I'm ready to confess." Silence. Then footsteps retreating down the corridor. Nyra waited. 20 minutes later, the door opened. Morvith entered, his expression carefully neutral. The guards stayed outside. "You're ready to confess?" he asked quietly. "Close the door." He did. Nyra waited until she heard the lock click. Then she moved fast, shadows surging forward to muffle any sound, her hand clamping over Morvith's mouth before he could cry out. His eyes went wide with shock. "I'm not going to hurt you," Nyra whispered, "but I need you to listen, really listen. Can you do that?" After a moment, he nodded. She released him, the shadows retreating slightly. Morvith stumbled back, his hand going to his throat. "What are you—" "I didn't kill those wolves," Nyra said flatly, "and I think you know that. The evidence is fabricated, all of it. Someone with intimate knowledge of this palace, of me, of how to manipulate the council." She stepped closer. "Someone who wants me dead badly enough to murder 17 innocent wolves." Morvith's expression flickered. "Even if that's true, you have no proof." "Not yet, but I will." Nyra's eyes flashed silver. "You said the journal was in my handwriting. Show it to me." "Why would I?" "Because you're not like the others. You didn't want this. Didn't want the rejection, didn't want me exiled, don't want me executed." She held his gaze. "You believe in justice. Real justice. Not this twisted version." Morvith was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his robes and pulled out a leather-bound journal. Nyra took it with trembling hands, opened it. The handwriting was indeed hers, or close enough that most wouldn't notice the difference. But Nyra saw it immediately. The way the tail on her Y curved slightly wrong. The pressure of the pen, too consistent, lacking the natural variation of actual handwriting. "This is good," she admitted. "Very good, but it's still fake." "Can you prove it?" "Not in a way the council would accept." She flipped through pages detailing murders she'd never committed, plans she'd never made. "But I can prove who did it." "How?" "By making them reveal themselves." Nyra handed the journal back. "At the trial tomorrow, I need you to do something for me. I can't help you escape. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to tell the truth." She met his eyes. "When the time comes, will you?" Morvith studied her face, searching for something. "You really didn't do this," he said slowly. Not a question. "No." Another long silence. "What do you need me to do?" This. Dawn broke cold and red. The trial was held in the Grand Hall, the same place Nyra had been rejected 4 days ago. Some sick poetry in that. The chamber was packed, every noble, every council member, half the palace guard. They'd come to see the rejected mate face justice. Nyra was led in wearing chains, silver chains, specifically designed to suppress shifter abilities. They burned against her skin, making the shadows flicker and fade, making her wolf howl in impotent fury. She was forced to kneel in the center of the ceremonial circle. Again. Always kneeling before these people. Alaric sat on his throne, his face carved from stone. The bond between them screamed with conflicting emotions, anger, doubt, pain, something that might have been regret buried deep. She didn't look at him. Couldn't. "Nyra Vale," Elder Morvith began formally, "you stand accused of 17 counts of murder, of organizing rogue forces against this kingdom, of treason of the highest order. How do you plead?" "Not guilty," Nyra said clearly. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "The evidence suggests otherwise," Rothman said, stepping forward. "A journal in your own hand. Physical evidence linking you to the crimes. Testimony from—" "What testimony?" Nyra interrupted. "Who testified against me?" Rothman's eyes narrowed. "Several wolves reported seeing a silver wolf in the wildlands during the time of the murders." "Several wolves. Names." "That's not relevant." "It's extremely relevant. If I'm being accused, I have the right to face my accusers." Alaric leaned forward slightly. "She's right. Name them." Rothman's jaw clenched. The witnesses requested anonymity for their own protection. "Convenient," Nyra said. "Anonymous witnesses. Planted evidence. A trial with a predetermined outcome. This isn't justice. It's an execution dressed up as one." "You dare!" Celestine started. "I dare plenty." Nyra struggled to her feet despite the chains. The silver burned, but she ignored it. "I dare to demand actual proof, real witnesses, evidence that can't be fabricated in a back room somewhere." "The journal is proof enough," Thane growled. "Your own words condemning you." "That's not my journal." "It's your handwriting. It's a forgery. A good one, but still fake." Nyra looked around the hall. "Someone went to a lot of trouble to frame me. Murdered 17 wolves just to sell the lie. That takes resources, power, access to the palace." She let the implication hang. "You're suggesting one of us did this?" Rothman's voice dripped with disdain. "Paranoid and delusional. The wildlands really did break you. Then explain how someone got my fur, my handwriting samples, access to my private chambers." Nyra's eyes swept the council. "Who had all three?" Silence. Then Alaric spoke, his voice flat. "Many people had access to your chambers, servants, guards, the quartermaster who delivered your clothes. All easily coerced or bribed by someone with authority." Nyra finally looked at him. "But the real question isn't who had access, it's who had motive." "Motive?" Alaric's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Who benefits from my death? Who wanted me gone badly enough to orchestrate this?" "Everyone in this room wanted you gone," Celestine said coldly. "You're an embarrassment, a disruption, a threat to the natural order." "Exactly. Which means everyone in this room is a suspect." Nyra smiled without humor. "So how do we narrow it down?" "Enough games," Rothman snapped. "You're guilty. The evidence proves it. Accept your sentence with whatever dignity you have left." "No." The word echoed in the sudden silence. "No?" Rothman repeated incredulously. "I reject this trial. I reject the false evidence, and I reject the sentence." Nyra's eyes flashed silver despite the chains. "And I invoke the right of truth." The hall erupted. The right of truth was ancient, older than the kingdom itself. A law that stated any accused could demand their innocence be proven through trial by combat. If they won, all charges were dropped. If they lost, Death was immediate. It was considered archaic, barbaric, but still legal. You can't invoke that, Celestine said, her voice sharp. You're already under trial. The right of truth supersedes all other proceedings. It's in the founding laws. Nyra looked to Morvith. Isn't it, Elder? Morvith hesitated, then nodded slowly. It is. No, Alaric said. His voice carried absolute authority. I forbid it. Nyra's head snapped toward him. You can't forbid it. Even a king can't override the founding laws. Watch me. They locked eyes across the distance. The bond flared between them, his determination crashing against her desperation. You're afraid, Nyra said quietly. Afraid I'll win. Afraid you'll be proven wrong. Afraid... She smiled bitterly. Afraid you condemned an innocent person because it was easier than trusting them. Alaric's hands gripped the throne's armrests hard enough that the wood creaked. If you're truly innocent, he said, voice low and dangerous, then prove it without violence. Explain the evidence. Provide alibis. Show us... I can't prove a negative. Can't prove I didn't do something. The only way to prove innocence against fabricated evidence is to expose the fabricator. She straightened despite the chains burning. And the right of truth will do exactly that. How? Thane demanded. You fight someone. Maybe you win. That doesn't prove who framed you. It does if the person who framed me is the one I fight. Another ripple through the crowd. You're saying one of us is guilty, Celestine said slowly. That's a serious accusation. It's the only explanation that fits. Someone with power, access, resources. Nyra's gaze swept the council members. Someone who stood to gain from my removal. Someone who maybe wanted the king's attention for themselves. Her eyes landed on Celestine. The noble's face went carefully blank. You're grasping at straws. Am I? You challenged me to combat the day after I joined the council. When that failed, suddenly there's evidence I'm a mass murderer. Nyra took a step forward despite the chains. You had access to my chambers. You're on the council. Could have ordered servants to plant evidence. You have the resources to hire someone to commit murders in the wild lands. And you have the motive. You want to be queen. That's insane, Celestine hissed. Is it? You've been the king's favorite for years, expected to be chosen as his mate. Then I show up, wolfless, pathetic, everything you're not, and the bond recognizes me anyway. Nyra's voice hardened. That must have burned. Knowing fate chose me over you. Celestine's hand went to her sword. You're projecting, making wild accusations because you're cornered. Then accept my challenge. Fight me. Prove your innocence the same way I'm trying to prove mine. I don't need to prove anything. I'm not on trial. Neither am I. Not anymore. Nyra turned to Morvith. I invoke the right of truth. I name Lady Celestine as my opponent, and I demand immediate combat. The hall went silent. Morvith looked to Alaric. The king's expression was unreadable. Your Majesty, Morvith said carefully. She has the right. The law is clear. The law, Alaric said slowly, was written for a different time. But it still stands. You cannot deny her without breaking your own kingdom's foundations. Alaric's jaw worked. For a long moment, Nyra thought he might refuse anyway, might order her executed regardless of law or precedent. Then he stood. Very well, the right of truth is granted. His voice carried no warmth, no hope. Nyra Vale will face Lady Celestine in trial by combat, to the death, immediately. Celestine's eyes flashed with something that might have been triumph. Gladly, the chains were removed from Nyra's wrists. The silver fell away, taking its suppressive effect with it. Power flooded back through her veins, shadows surging, wolf howling, everything that had been dampened roaring back to life. She flexed her hands, felt claws extend, felt the familiar weight of her wolf's strength settling into her bones. Across from her, Celestine drew her sword, the same blade that had cut Nyra days ago. This time, Celestine said quietly, I won't stop. Neither will I, Nyra replied. The crowd backed away, forming a circle around them. The grand hall transformed into an arena. Morvith raised his hand. The challenge is issued and accepted. Combat to death. Winner is declared innocent of all accusations. Loser? He paused. There is no loser, only the dead. Fight with honor. May truth prevail. He dropped his hand. Celestine lunged. Her sword moved like lightning, cutting through the air toward Nyra's throat. Fast, precise. A killing blow. Nyra twisted aside, shadows coiling around her arms. The blade missed by inches. Celestine spun, bringing the sword back in a vicious slash. Nyra blocked with shadow-hardened forearms, the impact sending shockwaves up her arms. They broke apart, circling. "You can't win," Celestine said. "Even if you kill me, it proves nothing. It proves I'm stronger than you thought. Strength isn't truth." "No, but it's survival." Nyra struck, shadows lashing out like whips, wrapping around Celestine's sword arm. The noble snarled, yanking free with strength that spoke of years of training. Their fight moved across the hall floor in a deadly dance. Celestine's technique was flawless, every movement efficient, every strike calculated. She fought like someone who'd trained her entire life for this. Nyra fought like someone who'd learned violence in the wildlands. Raw, brutal, unpredictable, blood-sprayed. Celestine's blade opened a gash along Nyra's shoulder. Nyra's claws raked across Celestine's ribs, tearing through armor and flesh. They crashed together, grappling, both trying to gain the killing position. "Why did you do it?" Nyra gasped. "Why kill 17 wolves just to frame me?" Celestine's eyes were wild. "Because you're an abomination. You shouldn't exist. Wolfless trash who somehow gained power. It's unnatural. Wrong." "So you murdered innocents to get rid of me?" "They were rogues, barely better than animals." Celestine headbutted Nyra, breaking her nose. Blood poured down Nyra's face. "And yes, I killed them. Harvested your fur from the bedding, forged the journal, planted everything perfectly." The admission rang through the hall. Nyra heard gasps, shocked murmurs. But Celestine wasn't done. "And it should have worked. You should have been executed. Should have died the way you were supposed to die in the wildlands." Celestine's sword found Nyra's side, sliding between ribs. "But you keep surviving, keep coming back, like a fucking cockroach." Pain exploded through Nyra's torso. The blade was lodged deep, grinding against bone. Celestine twisted it. Nyra screamed, but her hands found Celestine's throat. Shadows poured from her fingers, wrapping around the noble's neck like a noose. "You confessed," Nyra gasped through the pain. "Everyone heard. Doesn't matter if you're dead." Celestine yanked the sword free. Blood gushed from Nyra's side. Too much blood. The wound was mortal. Nyra fell to her knees. The hall spun around her. She could feel death approaching, cold, patient, inevitable. The bond screamed. She felt Alaric's surge of panic, of denial, of desperate realization that he'd been wrong, and now it was too late. Not like this, Nyra thought. Not after everything. Her wolf rose with a roar that shook the foundations. The transformation tore through her, faster than ever before, fueled by rage and desperation and the certainty that she would not die on her knees again. Silver fur erupted across her skin. Bones cracked and reformed. Her body expanded, growing, becoming the massive wolf that had emerged in the wildlands. But different this time. Stronger. The shadows didn't just cling to her, they became part of her, wrapping around Silver Fur until she was a creature of darkness and moonlight, neither fully wolf nor fully shadow. Something else entirely. The wound in her side closed, not healed, but held together by shadow that stitched flesh like black thread. Nyra stood on 4 legs and looked at Celestine with eyes that burned like silver fire. The noble's confidence cracked. "What?" Nyra pounced. 400 pounds of predator slammed into Celestine, driving her to the ground. The sword clattered away, useless. Celestine tried to scream. Nyra's jaws closed around her throat. One bite. That's all it would take. One crushing bite, and this would be over. Celestine's eyes were wide with terror. "Please." The word was barely a whisper. Nyra held her there, jaws tight enough to feel the pulse hammering beneath skin, tight enough to taste blood, but not biting down. Not yet. She wanted Celestine to feel what she'd felt. That moment of being completely powerless, completely at someone else's mercy, of knowing death was coming and being unable to stop it. Around them, the hall was silent, watching, waiting. Through the bond, Nyra felt Alaric's conflict, part of him wanting her to finish it, part of him horrified by what she'd become. "Kill her," the wolf urged. "She tried to destroy us. End her." Nyra's jaws tightened fractionally. Celestine whimpered. Then Nyra released her, stepped back, shifting to human form in a fluid motion she was still getting used to. She stood naked and bloodied over Celestine's prone form, shadows still wreathing her shoulders like wings. "I win," she said quietly, "and you confessed, in front of everyone, to murder, to conspiracy, to framing me." Celestine scrambled backward, hand going to her ruined throat. Blood seeped between her fingers where Nyra's teeth had almost punctured. "She's lying," Celestine gasped. I was trying to—" "We all heard you," Morvith said. His voice was heavy, sad. "You admitted to killing 17 wolves, to fabricating evidence, to attempting to execute an innocent. But she forced me to say it." "She was bleeding out at the time," Rothman said dryly. Even he looked shaken, hardly in a position to force confessions. Celestine looked around wildly, searching for support, finding none. "Your Majesty," she turned to Alaric desperately. "Please, she's manipulating you all. The bond is making you weak, making you enough." Alaric stood. His voice was cold, absolute. "You confessed to murder, multiple murders. That alone carries a death sentence." "Alaric, don't." He descended the throne steps slowly. "Don't say my name, don't plead, don't insult me further by pretending innocence." He stopped in front of Celestine. "You've been on my council for 8 years. I trusted you, valued your counsel, believed you served this kingdom with honor." His jaw clenched. "And you betrayed all of it. Killed innocents, framed your fellow council member, attempted to have her executed for crimes she didn't commit." "I did it for you!" Celestine's voice broke. "For us. She's an abomination, a threat to everything we built." "You did it for yourself," Alaric cut her off, "for your wounded pride, for your jealousy, for your delusion that you had some claim to me." His eyes flashed gold. "You never did." The words landed like blows. Celestine flinched as if he'd struck her. "Alaric, please. Guards!" he called. "Take her to the cells. Hold her for execution at dawn." Guards moved forward. Celestine struggled as they grabbed her arms, but she was weak from blood loss and shock. "You'll regret this," she screamed as they dragged her away. "The bond will destroy you. She'll destroy you. Everything I did was to save you from—" The doors slammed shut, cutting off her voice. Silence fell over the grand hall. Nyra stood in the center of it all, naked and bloody, shadows still clinging to her like a second skin. Her side throbbed where Celestine's sword had pierced her, held together only by shadow stitching. She was aware of eyes on her, hundreds of eyes, shocked, afraid, fascinated. Someone, a servant, brought her a cloak. She wrapped it around herself mechanically. "The trial is concluded," Morvith announced, his voice carrying to every corner. "Nyra Vale is declared innocent of all charges. Lady Celestine stands convicted of 17 counts of murder, conspiracy, and attempted execution of a council member. Justice has been served." More silence. Then, slowly, people began to disperse, murmuring to each other, casting glances back at Nyra, processing what they'd witnessed. Nyra stood alone in the emptying hall, until she wasn't. Alaric approached slowly. The bond between them pulsed with so many conflicting emotions that Nyra couldn't parse them all. He stopped a few feet away. "You were right," he said quietly, "about everything." Nyra laughed. The sound was broken. "That's supposed to make me feel better?" "No. Nothing I say will make this better." He ran a hand through his hair. "I almost had you executed for crimes you didn't commit. I chose evidence over trust, chose fear over faith. You chose wrong," Nyra finished. "Again." His jaw clenched. "Yes." They stood in the grand hall, the site of her rejection, her trial, her near execution, the place where she'd been broken repeatedly. "I don't know how to fix this," Alaric said. "Maybe you can't." "Then what?" Nyra looked at him, really looked at him, saw the conflict in his eyes, the guilt, the desperate need for her to forgive him, and felt nothing. The bond still pulled, still burned, still demanded they be together. But something inside her had gone cold. "I'm done," she said quietly. "Done? Trying to make you see me, trying to prove my worth. Trying to earn something you should have given freely. She pulled the cloak tighter. I've been rejected, exiled, framed for murder, and nearly executed, all because you can't decide if I'm worth the risk. Nyra, no. Her voice hardened. You don't get to Nyra me. Not anymore. You had chances. Multiple chances to choose me, to trust me. And every time you chose fear instead. I know, I fucked up. Completely, catastrophically fucked up. Alaric stepped closer. But the bond is torture. For both of us. I'm aware. Nyra met his eyes. But torture is better than being destroyed piece by someone who's supposed to protect me. She started walking toward the door. Where are you going? Alaric demanded. Away from you, away from this palace, away from all of it. You can't leave. The bond will hurt. Yes, it'll hurt like hell. She looked back over her shoulder. But at least it'll be honest pain, not this. She gestured between them. Whatever this is. Alaric moved fast, suddenly in front of her, blocking her path. Don't, he said. The word came out rough, desperate. Don't leave, not like this. Get out of my way. Nyra, please, move. The command came out layered with power, alpha will crashing against alpha will. Shadows exploded outward, slamming Alaric backward. He caught himself, his eyes wide with shock. They'd never challenged each other like this. Never pushed their combined power to see who was actually stronger. Now they knew. Nyra walked past him, made it to the door, felt the bond stretching, screaming, begging her to stay, ignored it. She was done being weak, done being broken, done being the one who sacrificed everything while he gave nothing. Her hand touched the door handle. I love you. The words stopped her cold. She didn't turn. Couldn't. What? I love you. Alaric repeated, his voice cracked. I don't know when it happened. Maybe that first moment when the bond recognized us. Maybe sometime in the wildlands when I felt you dying and thought my chest would cave in. Maybe just now when I watched you almost die again and realized I'd rather execute myself than live without you. Nyra's hand trembled on the handle. But I love you, he continued, and I'm terrified of it, because loving you makes me weak, makes me vulnerable, makes me human. Nyra finished. She finally turned. It makes you human. And you can't stand that. Alaric looked at her across the distance. No, I can't. Then you don't actually love me. You love the idea of me, the power I bring, the strength, the useful parts. Her voice went quiet. But not the parts that are fragile, not the parts that need protection, not the real me. That's not true, isn't it? You rejected me when I was weak. Imprisoned me when you doubted, almost executed me when it was convenient. She shook her head. That's not love, that's fear, Alaric interrupted. It's fear. You're right. I'm terrified of loving you because it means I could lose you, and I've never had anything worth losing before. The admission hung between them. Nyra felt something crack in her chest. Not the bond. Something else. The armor she'd built. So what now? She asked. Now I'm asking. Alaric moved closer, slowly, like approaching a wild animal. Begging, actually, for one more chance. To prove I can be what you need. To prove I can choose you over fear. You've had multiple chances. I know, and I've wasted all of them. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that the bond pulled almost painfully. But if you walk out that door, we're both condemned. The bond won't let us stay apart. It'll drive us both mad eventually. So I should stay out of self-preservation? No, you should stay because... He took a breath. Because despite everything, some part of you still wants to. Still hopes I can be better. Nyra wanted to deny it. Couldn't. Because he was right. Some small, stupid part of her still hoped. Still wanted this impossible bond to work. Still loved him, despite every reason not to. One chance, she said finally. One more. And if you fail, I won't. You don't know that. No. But I'll die trying not to. His eyes met hers. I swear it. On my crown. On my life. On whatever shred of honor I have left. Nyra studied his face, searching for lies, for manipulation, finding only desperate sincerity. Fine, she said. One more chance, but on my terms. Whatever you want. You don't control me. Don't order me around. Don't make decisions about my life without my input. Her eyes flashed silver. I'm your mate. Your equal, not your possession. Agreed. And if I say walk away, you walk. No arguments, no alpha dominance, no bond manipulation. His jaw clenched, but he nodded. Agreed. And Nyra stepped closer, close enough to feel his breath. If you ever doubt me again, if you ever choose fear over trust again, I'm gone. Permanently. Bond or no bond. Understood. They stood in the grand hall, surrounded by the ghosts of every moment that had broken them. The bond pulsed between them, damaged, twisted, barely holding together, but still there, still pulling. This is probably a mistake, Nyra said quietly. Probably, Alaric agreed. We're going to destroy each other. Maybe, or maybe... His hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His fingers brushed her cheek. Maybe we'll figure out how to build something from the wreckage. Nyra leaned into the touch despite herself. The bond sang at the contact, flooding them both with warmth that had been absent too long. Don't make me regret this, she whispered. I'll try not to. He pulled her closer. She went, despite every instinct screaming that this was dangerous, that she should protect herself, that loving him would only lead to more pain. Their foreheads touched. The bond settled slightly. Not healed, not whole, but quieter. We have a lot to figure out, Alaric murmured, starting with Celestine's execution tomorrow, and the rogue situation she was using as cover, and the fact that half your council still thinks I'm a threat. They're not wrong, Alaric said. You are a threat, just not to the kingdom. To what then? To everything I thought I knew about power, about strength, about what makes a good queen. Nyra pulled back to look at him. I never said I wanted to be queen. The bond says you don't have a choice. The bond can go fuck itself. Alaric laughed. Actually, laughed. The sound was rusty, like he'd forgotten how. There's the woman I'm terrified of, he said. Good. Stay terrified. Keeps you honest. His expression sobered. I mean it. About changing. About being better. I know, but talk is easy. Proof is what matters. Then I'll prove it. Every day. Until you believe me. That might take a while. I have time. They stood there in the empty hall, holding each other carefully, like broken things that might shatter with too much pressure. Outside, the blood moon was setting. Dawn approached, bringing Celestine's execution, the rogue situation, the hostile council, and 1,000 other problems they'd have to face. But for now, in this moment, they had each other. Damaged, distrustful, barely functional, but together. Dawn broke gray and cold over the execution grounds. Nyra stood at the edge of the stone platform, watching as guards prepared the pyre. Celestine would burn. Traditional punishment for treason and murder, quick enough to be merciful, slow enough to serve as warning. The bond hummed quietly in her chest. Alaric was still in the palace, dealing with council members who'd spent the night demanding explanations, demanding reassurances that their king hadn't completely lost his mind. He probably had. They both had. Nyra pulled her cloak tighter against the wind. The wound in her side ached despite the shadow stitching holding it closed. She'd need a real healer eventually, but not yet. Not until she'd seen this through. Footsteps behind her. She didn't turn. You didn't have to come, Elder Morvith said quietly. Yes, I did. To gloat? To witness. Nyra finally looked at him. She tried to destroy me. Killed 17 wolves to do it. I owe it to them to see justice done. Morvith nodded slowly. His ancient eyes studied her face. You could have killed her yesterday. In the hall. You had her throat in your jaws. I know. Why didn't you? Nyra was quiet for a moment. Because I'm not her. I won't kill unnecessarily just because I can. Some would call that weakness. Some are wrong. A thin smile crossed Morvith's weathered face. You're going to make an interesting queen. I'm not queen yet, might never be. The bond says otherwise. The bond has been wrong before. Has it? Morvith moved to stand beside her, looking out over the execution grounds. The bond recognized you when you were wolfless, powerless. Nothing that logic would suggest made you worthy, and yet here you stand, more powerful than most alphas, having survived exile and framing and near execution. Perhaps the bond saw what you would become. Or perhaps it's just torture with good marketing. Morvith actually laughed. You remind me of my mate. She had that same irreverence, that same refusal to accept things at face value. Had? She died 200 years ago. Rogue attack during the border wars. His expression went distant. I felt her die through the bond, felt the exact moment her heart stopped beating, and I've felt the echo of that loss every day since. Nyra looked at him with new understanding. Is that why you tried to stop Alaric from rejecting me? You knew what breaking a bond felt like. Breaking. Severing through death. Corrupting through rejection. Morvith's voice was heavy. All variations on the same agony, and I wouldn't wish any of them on my worst enemy. Yet you serve on a council that nearly executed me. I serve a kingdom. Sometimes that means difficult choices. He met her eyes. But I'm glad the truth came out. Glad you survived. Glad the bond has a chance to become what it should be. Which is what exactly? Partnership. Two halves of a whole. The kind of connection that makes you stronger together than you could ever be apart. He paused. If you let it. More footsteps. Guards escorting Celestine onto the platform. The noble looked worse than Nyra had ever seen her. Bruises covered her face where Nyra's wolf had struck her. Her throat was bandaged where teeth had nearly punctured. Her hands were bound with silver chains, but her eyes still burned with hatred. Come to watch me burn? Celestine asked, her voice hoarse. Nyra didn't respond. Of course you did. Can't resist gloating over your victory. Celestine laughed, and the sound was bitter. You think you've won, that you'll be queen, that the bond will make everything perfect. I think you murdered 17 innocent wolves, Nyra said flatly, and now you'll pay for it. Innocent, Celestine spat the word. They were rogues, madness-corrupted failures who contributed nothing. I did the kingdom a service by eliminating them. You used them, killed them to frame me. That's not service. That's psychopathy. Call it what you want. I did what was necessary to protect the kingdom from you. Celestine's eyes flashed. Because you're the real threat. An abomination with power that shouldn't exist. Sooner or later, you'll destroy everything. And when you do, she smiled. I'll be dead, but I'll have been proven right. The guards moved to chain her to the pyre. Celestine didn't resist, just kept her eyes on Nyra. He'll never truly love you, you know, she said. Alaric, he's not capable of it. He'll use you, breed you for heirs, keep you as a weapon. But love? She laughed again. That requires a heart, and he carved his out years ago to make room for ambition. Are you done? Nyra asked quietly. Not quite. Celestine leaned forward as far as the chains allowed. When this all falls apart, when the bond becomes unbearable, and you realize he'll never be what you need, remember that I tried to spare you this. I tried to give you a clean death, but you chose suffering instead. I chose survival. Same thing in the end. The guards finished securing the chains, stepped back. Morvith moved forward, holding a torch. As eldest council member still loyal to the crown, the duty fell to him. Lady Celestine, he began formally, you have been found guilty of 17 counts of murder, conspiracy against a council member, and high treason. The sentence is death by fire. Do you have any final words? Celestine's eyes never left Nyra's. I regret nothing, she said clearly, and I curse this bond. May it bring you both exactly what you deserve. Morvith lowered the torch. The pyre caught immediately, oil-soaked wood igniting with a whoosh that sent flames climbing skyward. Celestine didn't scream. Even as the fire reached her, consumed her, turned her body to ash, she didn't make a sound, just kept her eyes locked on Nyra's, hatred burning brighter than the flames. Nyra watched until there was nothing left but smoke and cinders. Then she turned and walked away. Ugh. She found Alaric in the throne room an hour later. He sat on the throne but looked nothing like a king. His armor was discarded, leaving him in a simple black shirt. His hair was disheveled. His eyes were shadowed with exhaustion. The bond pulsed with his weariness, his guilt, his desperate need for this all to be over. It's done, Nyra said from the doorway. Alaric looked up. How do you feel? Tired, angry, like I've aged 10 years in 4 days. She walked into the chamber slowly. How did the council take it? About as well as expected. Rothman wants a full investigation into my judgment. Thane wants increased patrols in the wildlands. Everyone wants reassurance that I'm not completely compromised by the bond. Are you? Completely? No. Partially? He ran a hand through his hair. Probably. Nyra moved closer. Her side throbbed with each step, but she ignored it. We need to talk, she said. Really talk. Not just about the bond or the council or immediate crises. About us. About what the hell we're doing. I know. Because I meant what I said yesterday. One more chance, but I need to know. She stopped a few feet from the throne. I need to know if you're actually capable of this. Of choosing me. Of being a partner instead of just a king. Alaric stood. Descended the throne steps until they were level. I don't know, he said honestly. I've spent my entire life building walls, keeping people at a distance, trusting no one completely. And now you're asking me to tear all that down. Not asking, demanding. Right, demanding. His jaw clenched. And if I can't, if I'm too damaged to be what you need, then we figure it out together. Or we don't. Nyra held his gaze. But I won't spend my life with someone who sees me as a liability instead of a partner. I don't see you as a liability. You imprisoned me, almost had me executed. Because I believed false evidence, He stopped, took a breath. Because I was afraid of how much power you have, of how that power makes me feel, of losing control. You can't control me. I'm starting to realize that. Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. You're stronger than me in ways I didn't think possible. Does that terrify you? Absolutely. Good. Stay terrified. It'll keep you from making stupid decisions. Alaric's mouth twitched, almost a smile. You keep saying that because you keep needing to hear it. They stood in the throne room, the space between them charged with everything unsaid. Finally, Alaric spoke. I want to try. To be better. To be what you deserve. His voice was rough, raw. But I need you to understand. I don't know how to do this. How to love someone without destroying them or being destroyed. Neither do I, Nyra admitted. The bond is the only relationship I've ever had, and it started with rejection and has been torture ever since. So we're both disasters. Completely. And we're supposed to rule a kingdom together? Terrifying thought, isn't it? This time Alaric actually smiled. What the hell are we doing? Surviving? Maybe. Nyra stepped closer. Or maybe we're building something new. Something that doesn't follow the old rules. The council will hate that. The council can adapt or leave. I'm done catering to people who wanted me dead 4 days ago. That's half the council. Then we'll build a new council. With people who aren't murderous psychopaths. Nyra's expression hardened. Starting with investigating everyone who supported Celestine. I want to know who else knew. Who else helped. Who else needs to burn. Alaric studied her face. You're talking about purging the council. I'm talking about justice. There's a difference, is there? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're planning executions. Only for the guilty. And who decides guilt? The evidence, the truth. Same things that should have decided my guilt. Nyra's eyes flashed silver. Or are you saying we should let traitors stay in power just to avoid making waves? No, I'm saying... Alaric stopped, rubbed his face. I'm saying you're right, and it scares me how quickly you've adapted to political ruthlessness. The wildlands taught me about survival. The trial taught me about power. And you... She moved closer still. You taught me that mercy without strength is worthless. I taught you that? You rejected me when I was weak, imprisoned me when you doubted, only respected me when I became dangerous. Nyra's voice went quiet. So yes, you taught me that strength is the only language anyone here actually speaks. The words landed like accusations, because they were. I'm sorry, Alaric said, for all of it, for being too afraid to see what was right in front of me, for letting fear make my decisions, for... His voice cracked. For hurting you in ways I can't undo. No, you can undo it. The damage is done. The bond is corrupted. I'll never trust you completely. Nyra met his eyes. But maybe we don't need complete trust. Maybe we just need enough to try. Is that enough for you? I don't know. Ask me in a year, or 10, or however long it takes to figure out if this bond is a gift or a curse. Alaric reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand cupped her face. I do love you, he said quietly. Even if I'm terrible at showing it, even if I keep fucking up, even if I don't deserve you. You don't deserve me, Nyra agreed, but the bond says we're stuck together anyway, so we might as well make the best of it. Romantic. I'm not here for romance. I'm here for survival, and maybe, if we're very lucky, something that doesn't actively destroy us. Low bar. You said it when you rejected me. The reminder hung between them. It would always be there, the foundational crack in their bond, the original sin they'd have to work around forever. But maybe that was okay. Maybe perfection was overrated. Maybe broken things could still function if you were careful with them. Alaric pulled her closer. She went, despite the pain in her side, despite every instinct screaming that this was dangerous. We're going to fight, he murmured against her hair, constantly, about everything. Probably. And you're going to challenge every decision I make, definitely. And I'm going to be a controlling bastard who struggles with letting you have power. Without question. His arms tightened around her. And we're still going to try? We don't have a choice. The bond won't let us walk away. Nyra pulled back to look at him. But if we're stuck together, we might as well be stuck together on our terms. Not the kingdom's, not the council's, ours. And what are our terms? Honesty. Even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Her eyes bored into his. No more lies, no more hiding behind duty or fear or political necessity. If you have a problem with me, you say it. If I terrify you, you admit it. If this isn't working, we face it together. Agreed. What else? Respect. I'm not your possession, not your weapon, not your convenient solution to the bond. I'm your equal, your partner, and you treat me as such. Agreed. And Nyra's voice dropped. If you ever doubt me again, if you ever choose fear over trust again, I'm gone. The bond can torture us both for eternity, but I won't stay with someone who can't choose me when it matters. Alaric's jaw clenched, but he nodded. Agreed. And my terms? You have terms. You get to make demands, so do I. His gold eyes held hers. You don't run. When things get hard, and they will, you don't disappear into the wildlands or lock yourself away. You stay, you fight, you work through it. Nyra wanted to argue. The instinct to run when cornered was burned into her bones, but he was right. Agreed, she finally said. What else? You let me protect you. Not because you're weak. I know you're not. But because protecting people I care about is how I show love. And I need you to let me do that sometimes. As long as protection doesn't become control. Fair. Anything else? Nyra thought about it. Yes. We rebuild the council together. Not you making decisions and me accepting them. Equal voice. Equal power. That's going to cause problems. Everything about us causes problems. Might as well embrace it. Alaric actually laughed. The sound was rusty but genuine. We're insane, he said. Completely. And this is probably going to end in disaster. Most likely. But we're trying anyway? Apparently. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't romantic. It was desperate and fierce, and tasted like blood and ash and everything they'd survived to get here. The bond sang. For the first time since the rejection, it felt almost right. Still damaged, still corrupted, but functional. A bridge instead of a weapon. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Alaric rested his forehead against hers. I'm going to fuck this up again, he said quietly. Multiple times, in ways I can't predict. I know, and I'm going to make you pay for it every time. Looking forward to it. Liar. His hands tightened on her waist. What happens now? Now, we face the council. Tell them we're bonded whether they like it or not, that I'm staying, that we're rebuilding, and that anyone who has a problem with it can challenge me directly. They'll hate that. They already hate me. Might as well give them good reason. You're going to be a terrifying queen. I'm going to be an honest queen. The terror is just a bonus. Nyra pulled back. But first, I need a healer. This shadow stitching is starting to fail. Alaric's eyes dropped to her side, where blood was seeping through her shirt. Christ, why didn't you say something? Because we needed to talk more than I needed to, not bleed. That's insane. Welcome to my decision-making process. He swept her up before she could protest, carrying her toward the door. I can walk, Nyra said. I know, but you're bleeding, and protection is how I show love, remember? So shut up and let me carry you to the healers. Nyra wanted to argue, didn't. Just let herself be carried through the palace corridors, past servants and guards who stared with open shock at their king, cradling the woman he'd tried to execute days ago. Let them stare. Let them whisper. Let them try to make sense of this impossible bond. She'd stopped trying. 3 weeks later, Nyra stood in the council chamber wearing formal robes that marked her as queen consort. Not queen, not yet. That would require a formal bonding ceremony, and neither she nor Alaric were ready for that level of commitment. But queen consort gave her equal voice, equal power, equal authority to reshape the kingdom alongside him. And reshape it they had. 4 council members had been implicated in Celestine's conspiracy, not directly involved in the murders, but aware of the framing and silent about it. All 4 had been given a choice, resign or face trial. All 4 resigned. Their seats were filled by new voices, younger voices, people who'd proven themselves through merit rather than bloodline. The council hated it. Nyra didn't care. The patrol reports from the Western Territories, Commander Thane was saying, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration. The rogue activity has actually increased since Celestine's execution. 17 attacks in 3 weeks, double our previous rate. Because someone else is leading them, Nyra said. Celestine wasn't working alone in the wildlands. She had help. Someone who's still out there. You have proof of this? Rothman asked. He was one of the few original council members who'd kept his seat, partly because he'd been vocal against Celestine's methods, partly because he was too entrenched to remove easily. Logic. Celestine wasn't a skilled enough fighter to kill 17 wolves alone, and the organization we're seeing now, coordinated attacks, strategic targets, that requires leadership. Nyra pulled out a map, spreading it across the table. Look at the attack patterns. They're testing our defenses, probing for weaknesses. Preparing for something larger, Alaric said quietly. Invasion? Thane's hand went to his sword instinctively. Maybe. Or recruitment, building an army of rogues strong enough to challenge the kingdom directly. Nyra traced the attack locations with her finger. Either way, we need to address it before it becomes unmanageable. How? Rothman leaned forward. We can't send patrols deep enough into the wildlands to find their base without losing soldiers. The terrain is too dangerous, the rogues too numerous. So we don't send soldiers. Nyra looked up, her eyes meeting Alaric's. We send me. The room erupted. Absolutely not, Alaric said immediately. It's the only option that makes sense. I've survived the wildlands before. I know the terrain, and I'm strong enough to handle rogues. You're also the queen consort. Sending you into hostile territory is strategic. I'm the only one here with the power to take on whoever's leading them. Nyra's voice hardened. Unless you have a better idea? Silence. This is insane, Rothman finally said. If you die out there, the bond kills the king. We'd lose both our rulers in one stroke. Then I won't die. You can't guarantee that. No, but I can guarantee that doing nothing will get more people killed. The rogues aren't going to stop. They're building toward something, and I'd rather face it on my terms than wait for them to bring the fight here. Alaric's jaw was clenched so tight Nyra could hear his teeth grinding. Through the bond, she felt his panic, his fury, his desperate need to refuse. No, he said flatly. That's not your decision alone anymore. We agreed. Equal voice, equal power. Nyra held his gaze. I'm going, with or without your approval. Like hell you are. Try to stop me. The challenge hung in the air. The council watched with barely concealed fascination as king and queen consort faced off across the table. Finally, Elder Morvith cleared his throat. Perhaps a compromise, he suggested carefully. Nyra goes into the wildlands, but not alone. We send a small team with her, experienced fighters who can— No, Nyra cut him off. A team will slow me down, make noise, get killed trying to protect me. Then what do you suggest? Morvith asked. I go alone, fast, quiet. Find the rogue leader and eliminate them. Return before anyone realizes I'm gone. And if you don't return? Alaric's voice was dangerously quiet. Then you'll feel it through the bond, and you'll know to prepare for war. The words were brutal, honest. Alaric stood abruptly, his chair scraping against stone. Council dismissed. Everyone out. Now. The council members fled. Only Nyra remained standing her ground as Alaric circled the table toward her. You're not going, he said when they were alone. Yes, I am. I forbid it. You don't get to forbid me anything. We agreed. Fuck what we agreed. His voice cracked. I'm not sending you into the wildlands to die. I'm not asking permission. Nyra. He grabbed her shoulders, not gently. I can't lose you. The bond aside, the practical considerations aside, I can't watch you walk into death. Then don't watch. Close your eyes. Trust that I'm strong enough to survive. You were strong enough before. Celestine still almost killed you. And I'm stronger now. I've trained, learned to control my wolf, mastered the shadows. Nyra's eyes flashed silver. I'm not the weak girl you rejected anymore. I'm not even the desperate survivor who came back. You're the woman I love, Alaric interrupted, and I'm terrified of losing you. The admission stopped her. I know you're strong, he continued, his voice rough. I know you're capable. I know you could probably take on half the rogues in the wildlands and win, but knowing that doesn't make it easier to let you go. This is what partnerships mean, Nyra said quietly. Trusting each other to make dangerous decisions, supporting each other even when it scares us. I hate this. I know, but do you trust me? His hands tightened on her shoulders. That's not fair. It's completely fair. We agreed. Honesty, respect, trust. So I'm asking, do you trust me to do this and come back? Alaric closed his eyes. Through the bond, Nyra felt his internal war, fear battling against trust, need to protect battling against need to respect her autonomy. Yes, he finally said. I trust you. I hate it, but I trust you. Then let me go. On one condition. What? You take this. He pulled something from his pocket, a small pendant on a silver chain. It's keyed to the bond. If you're in mortal danger, crush it. I'll feel it instantly. I'll come for you. Alaric, please, I need to know I can reach you if everything goes to hell. Nyra took the pendant. It was warm from his body heat, thrumming with faint magic. Fine, but I won't need it. Humor me. She put the chain around her neck. The pendant settled against her sternum, right over the bond. When are you leaving? Alaric asked. Tonight. Before anyone can try to stop me. Of course, tonight. He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her carefully. Come back to me. I will. Promise me. I promise to try. That's all anyone can promise. Not good enough. It's what you get. He kissed her, desperate and claiming and full of everything he couldn't say. When they broke apart, Nyra touched his face. This is what we signed up for, she said softly. Being partners means supporting each other's dangerous decisions, trusting each other to survive. I know, doesn't make it easier. Nothing about us is easy. No, but you're worth the difficulty. Nyra smiled. Keep thinking that. I'll be back before you have time to change your mind. What? The wildlands at night were different than Nyra remembered. She moved through the forest in wolf form, her silver fur catching moonlight, shadows trailing behind her like smoke. The bond pulsed steadily in her chest, Alaric's presence a constant anchor. She'd left the palace through a servant's entrance, avoiding guards and questions. By the time anyone realized she was gone, she'd be too deep in the wildlands to bring back easily. The rogue camps she'd marked on her mental map were scattered throughout the forest. She visited each one systematically, studying them from shadows. They were organized, too organized. Each camp had sentries, supply caches, crude fortifications. The rogues moved with purpose rather than madness. Someone was definitely controlling them. Nyra tracked deeper into the wildlands. 3 days of silent stalking brought her to the source, a massive encampment built around ancient ruins. hundreds of rogues, all moving with unnatural coordination. And at the center, Nyra's blood ran cold. The leader wasn't a wolf, it was something else, something old. A creature that shifted between forms so quickly, Nyra couldn't track it. Wolf, human, shadow, something else entirely. Ancient magic, the kind that predated kingdoms, the kind that had supposedly been extinct for centuries. Nyra watched from the tree line, her mind racing. This wasn't something she could fight alone. This wasn't even something she fully understood. She needed to retreat, report back, bring reinforcements. She turned to leave and came face to face with a massive rogue. He was easily twice her size, his eyes completely white with madness. But when he spoke, his voice was clear. "The master said you'd come." Nyra's hackles rose. The rogue smiled, a horrible stretching of too many teeth. "He's been waiting for you, the silver wolf, the abomination, the one who survived rejection and became something new." "Who is he?" "The first, the last, the one who remembers when wolves were gods." The rogue's head tilted unnaturally. "He wants to meet you. He says you'll understand." Nyra backed away slowly. "I'm leaving." "No, you're not." The attack came from all sides. Rogues poured from the forest, dozens of them, all moving with that same unnatural coordination. Nyra shifted to fight, but there were too many. They dragged her down through sheer numbers. Silver chains, real silver, burning her skin, wrapped around her limbs. Nyra fought. Shadows exploded outward, sending rogues flying. Her jaws snapped closed around throats. Her claws raked through flesh, but they kept coming. Eventually, she felt the pendant against her chest, Alaric's emergency beacon. She tried to crush it. A rogue's claws tore it away before she could. The chain snapped. The pendant fell into the dirt, and Nyra was dragged into the camp, toward the ancient creature at its center, with no way to call for help. The bond screamed in her chest, Alaric's sudden panic flooding through as he felt her terror. But he was too far away, and she was alone. The creature that awaited her in the ruins smiled with too many mouths. "Welcome, child," it said in a voice like grinding stone. "We have so much to discuss about what you are, about what you could become, about the real reason the bond chose you." Nyra snarled through the chains. The creature laughed. "Oh, this will be fun." And in the palace, 3 days' travel away, Alaric felt the bond explode with Nyra's terror, and knew he'd just lost her. The end. The bond that had begun with rejection, survived through exile, and been forged through trial. That bond now faced its greatest test. Not death, not separation, but something worse. The revelation that Nyra's power, her survival, her very existence, might be part of a plan far older and darker than anyone imagined. And whether Alaric could reach her in time, whether their damaged bond could withstand what was coming, whether love forged in pain could survive the truth, those questions would define not just their fate, but the fate of the kingdom itself. Some bonds are meant to save us. Others are meant to destroy us. And sometimes, the only way to know which kind you have is to let it burn you to ash and see what remains. Nyra would learn that truth in the ruins. Alaric would learn it racing to save her. And the kingdom would learn it when everything they thought they knew about bonds, about power, about the ancient magic sleeping in their bloodlines, came crashing down around them. But that story, the story of what Nyra truly was, what the bond really meant, and what price they'd both pay for surviving when they should have died. That story was written in blood and shadow, and the desperate choices people make when love becomes their greatest weapon and their deepest wound. This was just the beginning. The real test was yet to come.